Hey everyone, tonight we are going to transport you to a landscape that is as beautiful as it is absolutely unforgiving. The high, windswept plateau of central Anatolia, the heart of modern-day Turkey, to meet a ghost of an empire. We re-stepping back over 3,000 years to walk the ramparts of a civilization that once rivaled ancient Egypt, a superpower that bullied Babylon and traded punches with pharaohs, only to vanish so completely that for centuries, humanity forgot they ever really existed. You're standing in the dust, looking up at walls that seem built by giants, surrounded by a silence so heavy it feels like a physical weight on your shoulders. It's a rugged, high-altitude world of sharp crags and bitter winters, and honestly, with your modern lung capacity and dependency on air conditioning, you probably wouldn't. T survived this trek for more than 48 hours before getting heat stroke or being eaten by an Anatolian leopard. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and let me know in the comments where you're re-watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I love seeing the time stamps roll in from everywhere. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are standing at the base of a steep incline, the air thin and dry in your throat. This isn't the lush, fertile river valley you might expect when you think of the cradle of civilization. There is no Nile flooding its banks with clockwork precision to feed the masses. Nor are there the marshy, reed-filled abundance of the Tigris and Euphrates Delta. This is the Central Plateau, a harsh, elevated basin surrounded by mountain ranges that act like the walls of a fortress. The ground beneath your boots is rocky, dusted with scrub brush and wild thyme that releases a sharp, spicy scent when you crush it underfoot. The wind here doesn't just blow, it scours. It whips down from the Pontic Mountains in the north, carrying a chill that cuts through your tunic even though the sun is hammering down on the back of your neck. You start walking up the slope, your legs burn. You have to wonder why anyone would choose to build the capital of a massive empire here. It feels counterintuitive. Most great civilizations gravitate toward easy agriculture and lazy rivers. But the people who built this place, the Hittites, were clearly a different breed. They chose this spot, a place they call Hattusa, not because it was easy to live in, but because it was impossible to attack. The terrain fights you. Every step toward the city is an uphill battle, quite literally. The landscape is a chaotic jumble of limestone outcrops and deep ravines, a natural labyrinth that would force any invading army to break formation and scramble over rocks while being pelted with arrows from above. It's paranoid architecture at its finest. As you crest the ridge, the city finally reveals itself, and the scale of it punches the air right out of your lungs. It's massive. We aren't talking about a quaint hilltop village. This is a sprawling metropolis of stone and timber that cascades down the mountainside like a rock slide frozen in time. But what catches your eye, what holds your gaze, and makes you hesitate to take another step, are the walls. They are constructed of cyclopean masonry, massive, irregular blocks of limestone that fit together so tightly you couldn't slide a credit card between them, assuming you brought your visa back to the Bronze Age. You trudge toward the southern entrance, the famous Lion Gate. As you get closer, the sheer size of the portal makes you feel very small, which is exactly the point. Flanking the arched gateway are two enormous stone lions carved directly into the heavy blocks. They aren't the naturalistic sleeping lions you might see in a zoo. These beasts are alert, their chests puffed out, mouths open in a silent roar that has echoed here for 3.5 millennia. The stone carvers have exaggerated their muscles, giving them a supernatural bulk. Now, here's a little quirky detail that most people miss while they busy taking selfies with the statues. The lions are on just intimidation tactics for mortal enemies. They are spiritual security guards. The Hittites believed that doorways were dangerous places, liminal spaces where chaotic spirits could slip from the wilderness into the ordered world of the city. These lions are magically charged wards, staring down demons just as much as they are staring down Assyrian spies. You step carefully between them, half expecting a low growl to vibrate through the soles of your sandals. Once you pass through the shadow of the arch and step into the sunlight on the other side, the noise of the city hits you. It's a cacophony of clanging bronze, bleating goats, and the rhythmic thud of hammers. But underneath the noise, there is a strange familiarity to the language you hear drifting on the wind. If you listen closely to the guards muttering by the gate, you might catch words that sound bizarrely recognizable. Water for water, doru for door, tunu for knee. That's because the Hittites speak an Indo-European language. They are linguistic cousins to the Greeks, the Romans, and yes, even English speakers. It's a bit mind-blowing to think that, in a region dominated by Semitic and isolated languages, these people were walking around asking for a glass of water. Historians still argue whether the Hittite ancestors swept into this region from the steppes of Russia in a violent conquest, or if they slowly trickled in over centuries, gradually infiltrating the local population like a slow-moving fog. Regardless of how they arrived, they are here now, and they have turned this inhospitable rock pile into the nerve center of the Near East. You continue walking, moving deeper into the upper city. To your left and right are the foundations of temples, dozens of them. Hattusa is often called the city of 1,000 gods, and looking around, that doesn't feel like an exaggeration. It seems like every other building is dedicated to a deity. The Hittites were cosmic hoarders. They never met a god they didn't like. If they conquered a neighbor, they didn't banish the local gods. They kidnapped them, brought their statues here, and gave them a temple just in case that foreign god turned out to be the one that actually controlled the weather. It's a smart insurance policy, really. If you pray to everyone, someone has to answer, right? The path winds upward, toward the royal citadel, Uyukatel. The air is getting thinner, or maybe it's just the dust. You pass a group of scribes carrying wet clay tablets, their styluses tucked behind their ears like modern pencils. They look stressed, administering an empire that stretches from the Aegean Sea to the Euphrates River from a mountain fortress requires a lot of paperwork, or rather, claywork. They are rushing to record the king's latest decree, or perhaps an omen from a liver reading. We get to the liver readings later, don't you worry. As you reach the highest point of the city, the wind picks up again, whipping your hair across your face. You look out over the ramparts, gazing down into the valley below. From up here, the strategic brilliance is obvious. You can see for miles. You can see the dust clouds of approaching caravans, the glint of sunlight on the armor of a distant patrol, and the patchwork of fields trying to coax barley out of the dry soil. It is a harsh, brutal, magnificent place. It is a place that demands strength. Weakness here means death. If the winter doesn't get you, the Casca tribes in the northern mountains will. You take a deep breath, tasting the grit and the history. We're standing at the epicenter of the Bronze Age, in a city that was designed to intimidate the world. But even the thickest walls have cracks, and even the fiercest stone lions can't stop time. The people here feel invincible, secure behind their massive fortifications, ruling from their eagle's nest. But you know something they don't. You know that in a few centuries, this entire city will be a smoking ruin, abandoned to the elements, leaving only these stone lions to watch over the empty hills. But for now, the city is alive. The king is on his throne. The chariots are being oiled, and the sun is setting over the land of Hatti. You turn away from the citadel, leaving the administrative heart of the empire behind, and decide to walk the perimeter. This is not a casual evening stroll. We're talking about a circuit of roughly 4 miles of fortifications that bob and weave over terrain that would make a mountain goat reconsider its life choices. As you start your trek along the top of these ramparts, the wind hits you harder, uninterrupted by the cluster of temples below. You reach out to steady yourself against the stone, and that's when the reality of this construction really sinks in. The term Cyclopean masonry gets thrown around a lot in archaeology, usually to describe Mycenaean citadels in Greece, but the Hittites were doing it on a scale that makes other Bronze Age builders look like they were playing with Lego blocks. The stones under your hand are massive, irregular polygons, some weighing as much as a fully loaded cement. And here's the kicker. There is no mortar. None. No cement, no glue, no sticky rice paste. These multi-tuned boulders were chiseled to fit together like a chaotic 3D puzzle. The fit is so precise that the structure relies entirely on gravity and friction to stay upright. This isn't just aesthetic, it's engineering genius born of trauma. Anatolia is seismically active earthquake country. If you build a rigid wall with mortars, the first time the ground rolls, the wall snaps and crumbles. But these dry stone walls, they are flexible. When the earth shakes, the stones rattle and shift slightly in their sockets, riding out the wave and then settle back into place. It's the architectural equivalent of bending your knees when you land a jump. As you hike up toward the southern tip of the city, your calves start screaming. The incline is punishing. You are heading toward the architectural crown jewel of Hattusa's defenses, the Yerkapi Rampart. From a distance, it looks like a pyramid has been sliced in half and pasted onto the hillside. It is a massive artificial berm faced with smooth white limestone. When you finally stand at the base of it, looking up, you realize the psychological warfare at play here. Imagine you are an attacker. You've marched for weeks, you're hungry, you're tired, and probably nursing a grudge against your commander. You look up at this gleaming white slope that rises at a 35-degree angle. It is perfectly smooth. There are no handholds. If you try to run up it, you will slide back down. If you manage to scramble halfway up, you are a slow-moving, high-contrast target for the archers lining the top. It's basically a giant do not disturb sign made of rock. Historians still argue whether the Yerkapi Rampart was primarily a military defensive structure or a monumental stage for religious festivals. Some argue that its position is actually militarily redundant, that the natural terrain was defensible enough that this white pyramid was meant to be seen from miles away, a shining beacon of Hittite power, or perhaps a grandstand for the gods to watch the processions. It's the ancient equivalent of a guy buying a lifted truck that never goes off-road. Maybe they didn't need it, but they definitely wanted you to know they had it. But the Hittites didn't just build up, they built down. As you walk along the base of the Yerkapi, you spot a dark, triangular opening in the stone. It looks like a mouth. This is a pattern, a tunnel that cuts straight through the base of the rampart. You duck your head and step inside. The temperature drops instantly. The sunlight vanishes, replaced by the cool, damp smell of earth and old stone. The tunnel is constructed with a corbelled archstones stacked inward until they meet at the top, creating a long, triangular corridor that feels incredibly claustrophobic. It's about 230 feet long. As you walk through the dark, your footsteps echoing wearily against the slanted walls. You can imagine a squad of Hittite shock troops sprinting through here in the dead of night. The idea was that while the enemy was busy staring at the big walls, the Hittites could pop out of these secret tunnels, behind them, strike the flanks, and then vanish back into the earth before anyone knew what happened. It's a terrifying tactic. It's basically the military version of peekaboo, only with bronze axes instead of giggles. However, there is a fringe theory that suggests these tunnels weren't just for soldiers. Some archaeoastronomers have pointed out that at certain times of the year, the light aligns through these tunnels in very specific ways, suggesting they might have been birthing canals for the god's symbolic passages for a deity to be reborn from the mountain during the New Year festivals. Whether it was for killing enemies or birthing gods, standing in the middle of it in the pitch black makes you want to get back to the sunlight as fast as possible. You emerge on the other side, blinking in the glare, right in front of the Sphinx Gate. If the Lion Gate was for intimidation, the Sphinx Gate is for mystery. These creatures have the bodies of lions, the wings of eagles, and human faces that stare out with an unsettlingly calm expression. They are a blend of Egyptian and Mesopotamian motifs, but with a distinct Hittite twist. You notice that unlike the Egyptian sphinxes, which are usually male, these are female, and they aren't waiting for you to answer a riddle. They are watching the horizon. From this vantage point on the southern wall, you look out at the dense forests covering the mountains to the north. This is the source of the paranoia. The Hittites were a superpower, yes, but they were a superpower with a chronic pest problem. The mountains to the north were home to the Casca tribes. We don't know much about them because they didn't write anything down. They were too busy raiding, but the Hittites wrote about them constantly, usually with the clay tablet equivalent of all caps screaming. The Casca were the reason for these walls. They were unpredictable, guerrilla fighters who would sweep down from the hills, burn a few villages, steal the crops, and disappear before the heavy Hittite chariots could even be hitched up. It drove the Hittite kings absolutely crazy. Imagine building the greatest military machine of the age, capable of crushing empires. But you can't stop a bunch of hill folks from stealing your goats every autumn. It's humiliating. So, they built the walls higher. They added towers every 100 feet, jutting out from the wall so that archers could shoot sideways at anyone trying to scale the masonry. They cleared the trees for miles to remove cover. The architecture of Hattusa screams of a deep-seated insecurity. It is a city that never slept, a city that was constantly looking over its shoulder, waiting for the inevitable attack. As you finish your circuit and loop back toward the lower town, your legs are jelly. and you have a newfound respect for the Hittite sentries who walked this beat every day in full bronze armor. You look back at the gray stones snaking along the ridge. It looks eternal. It looks like it could stop anything. But as we continue our tours, you'll see that walls are only as strong as the people behind them, and the Hittites were about to face problems that no amount of limestone could fix. You leave the imposing shadow of the Sphinx Gate and head back down into the tangled streets of the lower city. As you weave through the foundations of mud brick houses and workshops, you have to ask yourself a fundamental question. Who exactly are these people? We've been calling them Hittites for the last 20 minutes, and you've probably seen that name in every history textbook you've ever skimmed. But here's the reality check that might annoy you if you like neat little categories. The Hittites never called themselves Hittites. If you stopped that potter over there by the kill and asked him, "Are you a Hittite?" he would look at you like you had a second head growing out of your shoulder. The name Hittite is actually a misunderstanding UL label stuck on them by the Hebrew Bible, which refers to the sons of Het. When 19th century archaeologists first started digging up these ruins, they needed a name for the civilization they were uncovering, so they grabbed the biblical term and it stuck. But the people living here, they refer to themselves as the people of the land of Hatti, or linguistically, they call their language Niseli, meaning the language of Nisa, a city to the southeast. It's a classic case of mistaken identity that has lasted for 3,000 years. But to understand why they became a superpower, you have to understand the strange cultural marriage that happened on this soil. Long before the Niseli speakers arrived with their chariots and their Indo-European words for water, this plateau was occupied by a completely different group of people, known as the Hashans. The Hashans are the ghosts within the ghost story. They were the indigenous population of central Anatolia. They didn't speak an Indo-European language. In fact, Hattic is an isolate. It's not related to any other known language family, living or dead. It's a linguistic orphan. They were the ones who originally named this region the land of Hatti. They were the ones who established the first city-states here. They were the ones who worshipped the deep, earthy gods of the soil and the sun. Then, sometime around 2000 BC, although the dates are fuzzy, the Indo-Europeans arrived. These were the ancestors of the people building these massive walls. Historians still argue whether this was a violent invasion involving burning cities and heads on spikes, or a slow, peaceful migration where they gradually moved into the neighborhood, borrowed a cup of sugar, and never left. The archaeological record is frustratingly ambiguous. We see destruction layers in some cities, but continuity in others. However it happened, the result was bizarre. Usually, when a conquering force arrives, think of the Romans or the Mongols, they impose their culture on the conquered. They rename the cities, they tear down the statues, they say, "We are in charge now, speak our language." The Hittite ancestors did the exact opposite. They looked around at the Hassian culture and said, "You know what? We love what you've done with the place. We'll take it all." They kept the name, Land of Hatti. They adopted the Hashan titles for their kings. They adopted the Hashan gods, myths, and rituals. It's almost like a corporate takeover where the new owners decide to keep the old brand name because it has better market recognition. The Nesit-speaking newcomers became the ruling class, but they culturally assimilated into the people they conquered. It's a rare historical example of the conquerors voluntarily becoming the conquered, at least culturally. This blending created a society that was incredibly open-minded, or perhaps just incredibly pragmatic. Walking through the city, you would hear a babble of tongues. The scribes here didn't just write in Nesili, they wrote in Akkadian, the international diplomatic language. They wrote in Hattic for religious rituals. They wrote in Luwian, Palaic, and Hurrian. They were the ultimate cultural hoarders. If a ritual worked for the Hashans, the Hittites kept it. If a god protected the Hurrians, the Hittites built him a temple. They were terrified of offending any cosmic power, so they just included everyone on the payroll. This brings us to one of the coolest moments in the history of linguistics, which you can practically feel humming in the air of this city. For centuries, the clay tablets found here were unreadable. Scholars knew the script was cuneiform, the wedge-shaped writing invented in Mesopotamia, but they couldn't understand the words. It was like reading a book written in the English alphabet, but in a language you don't speak, like Hungarian or Finnish. Then, in 1915, a Czech linguist named Bedřich Hrozner was staring at a tablet from this very site. He was looking at a sentence that read, "Nu ninden ezitin, watarma ikatini." He knew the ideogram for breadninda. He looked at the word isatin and thought, That looks a lot like the German word essen to eat, or the English eat. Then he looked at water. It looked like ... water, and ikatin looked like the Latin aqua. He realized he was reading. Now you will eat bread and drink water. It was a thunderclap moment. This mysterious, powerful empire in the middle of the Middle East wasn't speaking a strange, isolated tongue. They were speaking a cousin of English, German, Greek, and Persian. It completely rewrote the history books. It meant that Indo-Europeans had penetrated deep into the civilized world of the Near East much earlier than anyone thought. But let's get back to the streets of Hattusa. This cultural fusion, the organizational energy of the Indo-Europeans, mixed with the deep religious roots of the Haitians, created a unique vibe. The Haitians provided the legitimacy. By claiming to be the kings of Hatti, the newcomers anchored themselves to the land. They weren't just wandering warlords anymore. They were the inheritors of an ancient tradition. You can see this fusion in their art. As you pass a relief carving near a temple, you see the storm god, Teshub. He's holding a thunderbolt and standing on the backs of two mountain gods. Teshub is actually a Hurrian name adopted by the Hittites. The mountain gods he's standing on. Those are Haitian nature deities. And the artistic style, it borrows heavily from Assyria. It is a mishmash of everything the Near East had to offer, forged into something distinctly Hittite. This ability to assimilate was their superpower. It allowed them to expand rapidly. When they conquered a new region, they didn't force the locals to convert. They just said, "Cool gods, bring them to the capital. We'll build a wing for them." It made rebellion less likely. Why revolt against a king who is currently paying for your local temple's renovation? But don't mistake this openness for weakness. The people of Hatti were hard. The blending of cultures didn't create a soft artistic paradise. It created a highly efficient military machine, backed by a terrifying amount of divine support. They had the gods of the sky, the earth, the mountains, and the rivers on their side. They had the technology of the Indo-Europeans and the resilience of the native Anatolians. As you reach the bottom of the hill, near the Great Temple, you get a sense that this society is winding up a spring. They have secured their identity, they have built their walls. They have unified the disparate tribes of the plateau under one banner. They are no longer just surviving on the rocks, they are looking outward. They are looking south, toward the rich cities of Syria and Mesopotamia. They are hungry for loot, for glory, and for respect. The Hittites have arrived, even if that's not their real name. And the world is about to find out exactly what happens when you cross the durability of a mountain fortress with the mobility of the chariot. The quiet years of assimilation are over. The era of conquest is about to begin, and it's going to start with a raid so audacious, so logistically impossible, that it still leaves military historians scratching their heads. You are now marching south, leaving the cool, crisp air of the Anatolian plateau behind for the baking heat of the Syrian plains. You are walking in the shadow of a new king, Mercelii, if his grandfather Hattusa was the one who built the foundation of the house. Mercelii is the guy who decided to drive a monster truck through the living room just to see if the floorboards would hold. He is young, he is ambitious, and he is currently leading you on what might be the most ill-advised, logistically nightmarish, and utterly spectacular military campaign of the entire Bronze Age. To understand the sheer insanity of what is happening, you have to look at a map. In the ancient world, armies usually fight their neighbors. You fight the guy next door because you want his water, his land, or his cows. You do unusually walk past 3 or 4 other countries to punch a guy in the face who lives 1,000 miles away. But that is exactly what Mercelii is doing. He has his eyes set on Babylon. Babylon is the big apple of the ancient world. It is the city of Hammurabi, the center of law, culture, and high civilization. It is also, according to your Bronze Age Google Maps, roughly 1,200 miles away from Hattusa. That is a 400-mile round trip on foot and chariot through hostile territory, without a supply line to attack a city that has been a superpower for centuries. It's the military equivalent of driving from Paris to Moscow to rob a bank, and then hoping you have enough gas to get back before the cops or, in this case, the Hurrians show up. As you trudge along the banks of the Euphrates River, the dust kicking up into your eyes, you realize this isn't a conquest. You aren't going to stay in Babylon. You can't hold a city this far from home. This is a raid. It is a smash-on grab on a continental scale. Mercelii isn't doing this for land. He's doing it for street cred. He wants to prove that the great king of Hatti can strike anywhere, anytime. First, you have to settle some family business in Aleppo. Marcelli's grandfather had broken his teeth trying to take the great Syrian city of Aleppo, but Marcelli smashes it. He burns it to the ground, ending the kingdom of Yamhad. That alone would have been enough to secure his legacy. He could have turned around, went home, and had statues carved of himself looking heroic. But Marcelli has main character syndrome, so he keeps marching south. The journey down the Euphrates is grueling. Historians still argue whether Marcelli had a secret alliance with the Catastrophic tribal group lurking in the Zagros Mountains, who also wanted a piece of Babylon, or if he was just operating on pure adrenaline and bad advice. The theory goes that the Kassites might have acted as local guides or promised to distract the Babylonian army, because navigating this terrain blind would be suicide. But you don't see any Kassites. You just see mile after mile of riverbank, the heat shimmering off the water, and the horses foaming at the mouth. Then, finally, the walls of Babylon rise out of the haze. The city is ruled by Samsu-Ditana, the great Greek Greetrans of Hammurabi. The Babylonians are complacent. They are the center of the world. They probably look over the walls, see these dusty, hairy northerners with their strange Thremin chariots, and think, who are these tourists? They don't realize that the Hittite war machine has been refining its tactics in the mountains for generations. The attack, when it comes, is swift and brutal. You'll watch as the Hittite heavy chariots, which we will geek out over later, crash through the defenses. The Babylonian army, likely using lighter, more maneuverable vehicles suited for police actions, is simply run over. It's a massacre. Marcelli doesn't just defeat the army, he sacks the city. The Hittites pour into the streets, looting centuries of accumulated wealth. But here is the quirky detail that really defines this campaign. Marcelli doesn't just take the gold. He commits godnapping. You watch as his soldiers struggle to haul a massive statue out of the main temple. It is the statue of Marduk, the patron god of Babylon, and his consort Sarpanate. In the ancient world, a god lived in their statue. By taking Marduk, Marcelli isn't just stealing art. He is stealing Babylon's soul. He is effectively turning off the lights in the spiritual power grid of Mesopotamia. Without Marduk present, the Babylonian king cannot perform the New Year festivals to renew his kingship. Marcelli has technically fired the king of Babylon by stealing his boss. With the wagons loaded down with gold, silver, slaves, and one very confused god, the long march home begins. You are walking back north, looking over your shoulder every 5 minutes. The vacuum you left behind in Babylon is immediately filled by the Kassites, who will rule there for the next 400 years. In a way, Marcelli did the heavy lifting for them. He kicked down the door, shot the owner, and then left the keys for the squatters. The return journey is even harder than the way there. You are laden with heavy loot, moving slow. The Hurrians are harassing your flanks. But finally, after months on the road, you see the familiar peaks of Anatolia. You see the Lion Gate of Hattusa. The army cheers. Marcelli rides into the capital as the greatest conqueror in the history of the world. He has done the impossible. He has destroyed the legacy of Hammurabi. He has brought the wealth of the south to the poor, rocky north. He is a god among men. And then he gets murdered. You are standing in the palace, watching the celebrations, the wine flowing, the music playing. Marcelli is relaxing, probably thinking about how great his biography is going to be. But while he was away on his ego trip down the Euphrates, the sharks started circling back home. A conspiracy was brewing, led by his own brother-in-law Hantili. It's the classic tragedy of the absentee landlord. Marcelli was so focused on being a global superstar that he forgot to watch his own back. Hantili, aided by Marcelli's own son-in-law, Zidanta, corners the king. There is no epic duel. There is no final speech, just a knife in the dark. The man who conquered Babylon, who marched 2,400 miles and defeated the greatest power of the age, bleeds out on his own palace floor, killed by family. It is a shocking, brutal end to a spectacular reign, and it sets a terrible precedent. As you watch the conspirators wipe the blood off their daggers, you realize that the rule of law in Hattusa has just been replaced by the rule of the knife. Hantili takes the throne. But he hasn't just killed the king, he has cursed the kingdom. The ghosts of the royal house are waking up. Marcelli's assassination kicks off what historians call the Old Kingdom chaos, or more colorfully, the Bloody Years. For the next several generations, the primary cause of death for a Hittite king will be the guy standing next to him. You might want to keep your head down and stay away from the palace for a while, because things in Hattusa are about to get very Game of Thrones. But without the dragons or the satisfying season finale, the loot from Babylon is piled high in the treasury. Marduk is sitting in a Hittite temple, wondering why it's so cold, and the empire is sliding into anarchy. You are now living in a timeline that feels less like a historical chronicle and more like a slasher film where the killer is also the protagonist. We are entering the bloody years of the Hittite Old Kingdom, a period so chaotic that if you blink, you'll miss a coronation and a funeral happening on the same afternoon. You're standing in the royal palace at Hattusa, but the vibe has shifted dramatically. Under Mercelli, the air was electric with ambition and foreign gold. Now the air is thick with paranoia. Every shadow looks like an assassin, and every cup of wine looks like a one-way ticket to the underworld. Hantili, the man who murdered Mercelli, is now sitting on the throne. You watch him, and he doesn't look like a triumphant conqueror. He looks exhausted. There is a legend recorded in later Hittite texts that claims Hantili was haunted by what he did. He supposedly wandered the halls, muttering, "What have I done?" As the gods turn their backs on him, and the gods definitely seem annoyed, while Hantili is busy watching his own back in the capital, the empire is falling apart at the seams. The Hurrians, those pesky neighbors to the southeast, invade the land of Hatti. They ravage the countryside, and Hantili is too paralyzed by fear and internal security to stop them effectively. But the real threat isn't the Hurrians, it's the guy standing next to Hantili. It's Zidanta. Remember him? He was the co-conspirator, the Soni La, who helped hold the knife or at least held the door open when Mercelli was killed. You watch Zidanta over the years, he's patient. He watches Hantili grow old. But Zidanta isn't content to just wait for nature to take its course. He wants to ensure his line takes the throne, not Hantili's son. So, in a move that surprises absolutely no one in this viper pit, Zidanta murders Hantili's son and heir, Piseni, along with Pecheni's sons. It's a generational purge. Zidanta steps over the bodies of his own nephews to sit on the throne. You are witnessing the normalization of regicide. It has become the standard mechanism for the transfer of power. In most monarchies, the cry is "the king is dead. Long live the king." In Hattusa, it's currently "the king is dead, who has the bloodiest sword." Zidanta rules for a while, probably thinking he's won the game. But the curse of the knife is contagious. You fast forward a few years and see Zidanta, now an old man, looking into the eyes of his own son Amuna. You might expect a son to be loyal, or at least patient enough to wait for his inheritance. Not in this family. Amuna murders his own father. It's a patricide that shakes even the hardened Hittite nobility. Killing a brother is one thing. Killing your father is a cosmic offense. Amuna takes the throne, but his reign is a disaster. Real historians still argue whether Amuna was simply incompetent or if the historical records were deliberately written to make him look cursed, to justify the coup that killed him. The texts tell us that the grain did not grow and the cattle did not breed. It's as if the land itself is rejecting him, but the provinces revolt. The empire that Mercelli expanded to Babylon has now shrunk back to the immediate vicinity of Hattusa. You are watching a superpower implode into a city-state because the leadership is too busy playing battle royal in the palace. Amuna finally dies, surprisingly, of natural causes, which is the biggest plot twist so far. But the bloodshed doesn't stop. Amuna has two legitimate sons, Titi and Hantili. Yes, they reuse names a lot, which doesn't help with the confusion. They are next in line, but there is an illegitimate son, a man named Hosea. You watch Hosea eyeing the throne. He knows the drill. He knows that if he lets his half-brothers live, they will eventually kill him. So, he strikes first. He murders Titi and Hantili, the sons, not the ghosts, and seizes power. At this point, you are probably exhausted just trying to keep track of the body count. It's a revolving door of murderers, murdering murderers. Now, here is a quirky detail about this chaos. Despite the bloodshed, the Hittite bureaucracy keeps humming along. We know about all these murders because the Hittites wrote them down. They didn't try to sanitize their history like the Egyptians, who would just chisel a hated pharaoh's name off the wall and pretend he never existed. The Hittites aired their dirty laundry in clay. They documented the treachery with a blunt, almost dry frankness. It's like reading a police blotter written by a court stenographer. Then Zidanta killed Piseni. Then Amunna killed Zidanta, and the gods were angry. Huzziah is now king, but he has a problem. There is one person left who has a legitimate claim to the throne, a man named Telepinu. Telepinu is married to Huzziah's sister. In a normal family, this would make them brothers-in-law who awkwardly talk about sports at Thanksgiving. In the Hittite royal family, it makes Telepinu a walking target. You are there in the shadows as Hosea plots his next move. He decides that Telepinu has to go. He plans a hit. But this time, the cycle hits a snag. Telepinu is not like the others. He is smart, he is popular, and most importantly, he has better spies. He catches wind of the assassination plot before the assassins can strike. This is the turning point. To watch as Telepinu launches a counter-coup. He captures Hosea and his 5 brothers. Now, based on the last 50 years of history, you know exactly what comes next. Telepinu should drag them into the courtyard and execute them. He should wipe out the entire line to secure his safety. That is the Hittite way. But Telepinu pauses. He looks at the blade in his hand, and he looks at the crumbling empire around him. He looks at the empty granaries, the rebellious provinces, and the encroaching enemies. He realizes something that his predecessors didn't. If he kills Huzziah, he just invites the next ambitious noble to kill him. The violence isn't securing the throne, it's destroying the kingdom. So, in a moment that is genuinely shocking for the Bronze Age, Telepinu chooses mercy. He banishes Huzziah and his brothers to remote farms. He says, "Go grow barley and stay out of trouble." He spares their lives. You stand there watching the former king being carted off to rural exile instead of a shallow grave, and you realize you are witnessing the end of an era. The bloody years have burned themselves out. The sheer exhaustion of constant murder has finally forced a change. Telepinu steps up to the throne, not as just another warlord, but as a reformer. He knows that if he doesn't fix the system, the Hittites are going to vanish into history, another failed state in the debris of the Near East. He sits down with his scribes, he orders fresh clay. He is about to dictate a document that will change everything. A document that some legal scholars consider one of the most important texts of the ancient world. He is going to write a law that stops the knives. You are now standing in the royal archive room, a dimly lit space smelling of damp earth and dust. In the center sits King Telepinu, rubbing his temples. He looks like a man who has spent the last decade putting out fires, both literal and metaphorical. He is dictating to a scribe, and what he is saying isn't just a royal decree. It is a desperate attempt to build a guardrail for a civilization that is careening off a cliff. You are witnessing the drafting of the Telepinu Proclamation. Most ancient kings leave behind inscriptions that say things like, "I am the best, I killed all the lions, and my muscles are huge." Telepinu does something radically different. He starts his proclamation with a history lesson. He effectively dictates a previously on recap of the Hittite Empire's greatest failures. He lists the murders we just walked through: Morsili, Hentili, Zidanta, Amunna, and he connects the dots for everyone. He says, explicitly, when we were united, we were unstoppable. When we started stabbing each other, the enemy took our lands. It's a moment of stunning self-awareness. It's a king admitting that the royal family has been the problem all along. The scribe presses the wedge into the soft clay, recording the new rules. And these rules are specific. Telepinu is tired of the ambiguity that leads to civil war. So, he lays out a flowchart for succession that is so clear even a drunk noble could understand it. Rule number 1. The king's son of the first rank becomes king. If there is no first-rank son, then the son of the second rank takes it. If there are no sons at all, then Hattusa is the crucial part that saved the empire, the husband of the first rank. Daughter becomes king. This inclusion of the Soni law is the safety valve. It ensures that even if the male line dies out, which, given the survival rate of Hittite princes, was highly probable, the dynasty continues without a civil war. It integrates the female line into the succession process, which was a progressive move for a society dominated by patriarchs. But Telepinu doesn't stop at succession. He drops a bombshell that makes political scientists today spill their coffee. He invents the panku. The panku literally meaning the whole, or the assembly is a council of high-ranking nobles, commanders, and courtiers. Telepinu grants them the power to judge the king. You heard that right. In a world of absolute god kings, where the pharaoh S word is law, and the Mesopotamian kings rule by divine terror, Telepinu creates a constitutional monarchy. He writes, "If the king does evil, the Panku shall investigate him." Now, historians still argue whether the Panku ever actually exercised this power, or if it was just a theoretical threat of paper tiger meant to scare the king into behaving. We don't have any records of a Hittite king being legally executed by the assembly. But the fact that the concept existed, written in stone, well, clay, is revolutionary. It's a check on executive power 3,000 years before the Magna Carta. It suggests that the king is not above the law. He is the servant of the law. And here's the quirky detail that shows just how sick of the drama Telepinu really was. He bans collective punishment. In the ancient world, if a noble committed treason, you didn't just kill him. You killed his wife, his kids, his cattle, and probably his dog just to be safe. It was about rooting out the bad blood. Telepinu says, "Nope, done." He decrees that if a man commits a crime, let him die alone. His family is not to be touched. Their property is not to be confiscated. This is huge. It stops the cycle of vengeance. If you execute a traitor but let his son keep the family estate, the son might still hate you, but he's less likely to start a rebellion because he has something to lose. It stabilizes the aristocracy. It tells the nobles, the king might kill you if you mess up, but your legacy is safe. It lowers the temperature of the entire political ecosystem. You watch the scribe finish the tablet. He smooths the edges. This piece of dried mud is going to stabilize the Hittite state for the next several centuries. It ends the bloody years. The assassinations stop mostly. The empire takes a deep breath. The borders stabilize. The farmers can go back to farming without worrying that a new warlord will burn their fields next week. But Telepinu knows that laws are only one part of the equation. You can write all the rules you want, but people are superstitious animals. They need something more primal than a legal code to hold them together. They need the gods. And not just their own gods, they need all the gods. As you walk out of the archive and back into the sunlight of Hattusa, you notice that the city is changing. The frantic energy of the civil wars is being replaced by a solemn, ritualistic rhythm. Telepinu's reforms have cleared the way for a cultural explosion. With the throne secure, the Hittites can turn their attention to the heavens. They are about to embark on a spiritual recruitment drive that will make their pantheon the most crowded VIP section in the ancient world. You wander toward the temple district. The smell of incense is getting stronger, overpowering the dust. You hear chants in Hattic songs, in Hurrian, and prayers in Luwian. Telepinu has fixed the earthly government, but to secure the empire's future, the Hittites need to secure the favor of every single deity they can get their hands on. You stop in front of a new temple being constructed. The workers are hauling a statue of a god you don't recognize. He looks fierce, holding a mace. A priest tells you it's a deity they picked up from a town near the Black Sea. Better safe than sorry, he mutters. This is the genius of the Hittite state. It's not just a military alliance. It's a theological sponge. And as we step into the next section, you're going to see just how deep this obsession went. You're going to meet the 1,000 gods of Hatti, and you'll realize that for the Hittites, religion wasn't just faith, it was bureaucracy. It was diplomacy, and it was the ultimate survival strategy. You are standing in the middle of what looks like a celestial traffic jam. You've wandered into the great temple complex in the lower city, and if you thought the administrative archives were busy, they have nothing on the religious sector. You are surrounded by a dizzying array of statues, altars, and priests who all seem to be wearing different hats, literally. You are looking at the result of the world's most aggressive spiritual acquisition strategy. You are witnessing the 1,000 gods of Hatti. This phrase isn't a poetic exaggeration by modern historians. It's a phrase the Hittites used themselves in their treaties. When they swore an oath, they didn't just swear by one god. They called the roll. They listed the 1,000 gods as witnesses, effectively seizing the entire universe on their legal documents. And looking around, you can see why. The Hittite approach to theology was simple. More is better. In the ancient world, most cultures were fairly exclusive. The Egyptians had their guys, the Babylonians had their guys, and they generally stuck to their lanes. The Hittites, however, were cosmic collectors. They were the theological equivalent of that aunt who collects souvenir spoons from every state she visits, except the spoons are powerful deities capable of smiting you with lightning. As you walk past the sanctuaries, you start to spot the patterns, or rather, the lack of them. Over here, you see a temple dedicated to the sun goddess of Arena. She's the supreme lady of the land, a Hattian deity who predates the Hittites themselves. She is the boss. But right next to her, sharing the limelight, is the storm god Teshub. But wait, Teshub is Hurrian. He was imported from the southeast. And over there, that's Ishtar, the Mesopotamian goddess of love and war, looking very much at home in the Anatolian highlands. It gets even more confusing. You might see a priest offering bread to the storm god of Nerek, and then walk 10 minutes and see another priest offering wine to the storm god of Zipalanda to you. They might look like the same guy, same thunderbolt, same helmet, same angry expression. But to the Hittites, these were distinct legal entities. It's like having a local franchise of a national chain. The storm god of Nerek handles local weather patterns and disputes in the north, while the storm god of Zipalanda manages the central plains. They are the same brand, but different managers. Historians still argue whether the Hittite elite actually believed these were all separate beings, or if they understood them as different interfaces for the same divine power. Did they really think there were 20 different storm gods, or was it just a way to respect local traditions? You call him Tarhan, I call him Teshub. Let's just agree he hates it when we don't sacrifice a goat. This hoarding instinct wasn't just about covering their bases, it was political genius. When the Hittites conquered a city, they didn't smash the local god statue unless they were pulling a merciless-style heist on Babylon. Instead, they invited the god to the capital. They would physically transport the cult statue to Hattusa and set it up in a temple. This did two things. First, it terrified the conquered people their god was now a hostage in the Hittite capital. If they rebelled, their god might get melted down. Second, it made the conquered people feel included. Hey, look, our local guy made it to the big leagues. He's dining with the sun goddess now. It turned the empire into a spiritual federation where everyone had a representative in the capital. You step into the courtyard of the Great Temple, the largest religious structure in the city. The scale is humbling. The walls are built of green gabbo stone that contrasts sharply with the gray limestone of the fortifications. This massive complex is dedicated to the power couple of the pantheon, the storm god and the sun goddess. But as you look closer at the rituals being performed, you notice something quirky. The gods are treated exactly like Hymenton's house guests. The Hittites didn't just pray to their gods, they fed them, washed them, clothed them, and entertained them on a strict schedule. The clay tablets are filled with instructions that read like a rider for a diva rock star. The god must be washed with warm water. The god must be dressed in the blue tunic, not the red one. The god wants honey bread, and if there is a fly on the bread, the baker dies. That last part isn't a joke. The Hittites were obsessed with purity. You watch a priest obsessively straining water through a cloth sieve before offering it to the statue. They believed that if a god was served dirty food or touched by an unclean person, the god would get angry and leave. And a god leaving was the ultimate disaster. It meant the protection over the city vanished. So, the temple staff operates with a level of hygiene that rivals a modern surgical theater. This anxiety about keeping the gods happy created a massive industry. The temples were the economic engines of the state. They owned vast tracts of land, thousands of cattle, and employed armies of farmers, weavers, potters, and smiths. When you paid your taxes, you were effectively paying the god's grocery bill. As you wander deeper into the sacred precinct, you stumble upon a ritual that feels ... darker. You see a group of priests speaking a language that isn't necessarily. They are speaking Hurrian. They are invoking the gods of the underworld ancient chthonic deities who live in the dark earth. The Hittites didn't just look up, they looked down. They had a healthy respect for the deities of the pit, the ones who controlled death and decay. You might notice small pits dug into the ground, lined with clay. These are abirichal pits used to communicate with the infernal powers. The priests sacrifice a piglet, lowering it into the pit to appease the forces of entropy. It's a reminder that for all the gold and grandeur, Hittite religion was deeply rooted in the primal fear of the unknown. They were trying to manage a chaotic universe through bureaucracy and bribery. One quirky fringe tidbit you might find fascinating is the concept of god drinking. In the festivals, the king doesn't just drink to the god. The texts say he drinks the god. Scholars have scratched their heads over this for decades. Does it mean he symbolically consumes the deity's power? Is it a mistranslation? Or does it imply that the vessel itself represents the god? Imagine the king raising a cup that is the storm god, taking a sip, and thereby internalizing the divine storm. It's a level of communion that goes beyond simple prayer. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows over the thousands of temples, you realize that this city is a machine designed to generate favor. It is a spiritual factory. Every chant, every loaf of bread, every drop of oil is a cog in a mechanism designed to keep the universe running smoothly. The Hittites believed that if they stopped, the sun would fall out of the sky. But what happens when the rituals fail? What happens when you feed the gods, wash them, and sing to them, but the crops still die? What happens when the 1,000 gods go silent? The Hittites had a procedure for that too. They didn't just pray harder, they turned to magic, and not the sparkledest fairy magic you might be thinking of. We are talking about old-school, gritty, sympathetic magic, involving sheep livers, tangled wool, and very specific curses. You turn a corner and see a woman sitting by a small fire. She isn't a high priestess in gold robes. She's an old woman, a wise woman, a ritual practitioner. She is holding a ball of wool and a clay puppy. You might want to step back, because what she's about to do is going to get messy. And it's the only way to clean up the spiritual pollution that the high priests couldn't touch. You lean in closer to the fire, the heat warming your face, while the old woman, or Hasawa, as the Hittites call hermetos, in a low, rhythmic chant. The grand, polished limestone of the great temple feels a world away. You are now in a domestic courtyard, or perhaps a side chamber of the palace, where the real, gritty work of spiritual hygiene happens. The high priests might handle the cosmic diplomacy with the storm god. But when the king has a nightmare, or his joints ache, or the royal family just feels off, they call in the Hasawa. She is the janitor of the soul. The logic you are witnessing here is based on a very specific Hittite worldview. Sin and bad luck are unmoral failings. They are physical substances. They are like mud or a virus. If you touch a dirty object, you get dirty. If you walk through a cursed doorway, you pick up the residue of the curse. And just like mud, it can be washed off if you have the right soap. The woman holds up a ball of wool. It's tangled, knotted, and messy. Perfect visual representation of a chaotic life. She looks at you, then at the person undergoing the ritual. Let's imagine it's a nervous Hittite prince. She starts to pull at the wool, speaking directly to the knot. Just as this wool is tangled, she intones, her voice cracking with age. So are the thoughts and the nerves of the sacrificer tangled. Then, with a sudden, decisive motion, she throws the wool into the fire. It flares up, the smell of singed hair filling the small space. Just as the fire consumes this wool, she says, "So let the fire consume the anger, the wrath, and the perjury." It's sympathetic magic, 101, by destroying the symbol of the problem. She destroys the problem itself. It's simple, visceral, and psychologically incredibly satisfying. You can actually feel the tension in the room drop as the wool turns to ash. But the wool is just the warm-up act. Now she reaches into a basket and pulls out a small, crudely fashioned figure. It's a puppy made of unbaked clay. It's cute, in a rough, kindergarten art rock kind of way. But this isn't a toy, this is a skate puppy. In the Hittite ritual playbook, pollution has to go somewhere. You can't just destroy energy, you have to transfer it. The Hasawa takes the clay puppy and waves it over the prince's body. She rubs it against his shoulders, his chest, his knees. She is literally sponging off the bad vibes. She whispers, "Whatever evil is in this man, whatever oath he broke, whatever unclean thing he touched, let it enter this clay. Let the clay carry it." This brings us to a rather quirky and slightly dark fringe tidbit. The Hittites did always use clay. There are ritual texts that explicitly call for live puppies to be used in this way. They would wave a live puppy over the person, and then, well, let's just say the puppy didn't make it. The idea was that the animal would swallow the sickness or the curse, acting as a disposable container for the spiritual toxic waste. In some rituals, they would sever the puppy, placing half on one side of a gate and half on the other. And the army would march between the pieces to be purified before a campaign. It's a gruesome image that definitely clashes with the cute ancient civilization vibe, but it underscores just how desperate they were to control their environment. Once the clay puppy has absorbed the evil, the old woman doesn't just toss it in the trash. That would be dangerous, like throwing a radioactive isotope in a municipal bin. She takes it to the edge of the property, or sometimes to the riverbank, and smashes it. Or she buries it deep in the earth, pinning it down with iron nails so the evil can't crawl back out. "Go down to the dark earth," she commands. "Don't come back." Historians still argue whether these Hittite rituals directly influence the biblical tradition of the scapegoat. You probably know the story from Leviticus. A priest places the sins of the community onto the head of a goat and sends it out into the wilderness. The parallels are striking. Both cultures emerged in the same general neighborhood of the ancient Near East, and both shared this profound anxiety about containment. Did the Hebrews learn it from the Hittites? Did they both learn it from an older, lost source? It's a debate that keeps biblical scholars and Assyriologists busy at conferences, usually over warm white wine. As the old woman finishes, she performs one last act that feels strangely modern. She spits. She spits 3 times on the ground. Pa, pa, pa. It's a universal gesture of rejection. You see baseball players do it. You see grandmothers in Mediterranean villages do it to ward off the evil eye. It's a human instinct to expel the bad taste of bad luck from your mouth. She wipes her hands on a cloth and sighs. The ritual is done. The prince looks relieved. The air feels lighter. You have just witnessed the machinery of Hittite resilience. They didn't just build walls to keep out armies. They built rituals to keep out despair. They had a tool for everything. If the harvest failed, there was a ritual. If the king was impotent, there was a ritual, which involved a lot of very specific and awkward dialogue. If you had a family argument, there was a ritual to untie the tongues of anger. This obsession with control, with manipulating the materials of the world to bend reality to their will, didn't stop at clay puppies and wool. As you leave the smoky courtyard and head back out into the bustling streets of the lower city, you hear a new sound. It's not the chanting of priests or the bleating of goats. It is a rhythmic, high-pitched clank-clank-clang. It is the sound of metal striking metal. But it's not the dull thud of bronze, the alloy that has defined the last 2,000 years of human history. This sound is sharper. It rings longer. You are hearing the birth pangs of a new age. The Hittites are famous for their gods and their laws, but there is one legend about them that has persisted longer than any other legend, that they were the masters of a secret supermetal. You follow the sound toward the industrial district. The smoke here is thick and smells of charcoal and sulfur. You are about to step into a smithy where the Hittites are working with a material that is notoriously difficult, stubborn, and requires temperatures that would melt a bronze furnace into a puddle. You are about to see how the Hittites handled iron for decades. Popular history told us that the Hittites had a monopoly on iron weapons, that they had secret steel swords that could slice through Egyptian bronze like butter, and that this technological edge is what made them a superpower. It's a cool story. It sounds like something out of a fantasy novel. But as we step into the workshop and feel the blast of heat from the bellows, we're going to find out that the truth about Hittite iron is actually much more complicated, much more expensive, and honestly a lot more interesting than the myth. You step inside the smithy, and the heat hits you like a physical blow. The air here tastes metallic, thick with the acrid smoke of charcoal fires. Sweat instantly beads on your forehead. In the center of the room, stripped to the waist, are men covered in soot, working bellows that look like the lungs of some giant beast. They are pumping air into a furnace that is glowing a blinding, angry white. But what they are pulling out of that fire is UNT, a liquid stream of metal like UDC, in a bronze foundry. It's a gross, lumpy, glowing sponge. This is the moment we have to kill one of the biggest myths in history class. You've probably heard the story. The Hittites were the first to master iron. They armed their soldiers with unbreakable steel swords, and they marched out and shattered the bronze weapons of their enemies like glass. It's the civilization tech tree theory of history. Once you unlock ironworking, you win the game. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that is almost entirely nonsense. If you looked around this workshop, you wouldn't see piles of iron swords ready for the infantry. You wouldn't see iron spearheads being mass-produced in molds. What you would see is a smith taking that glowing sponge called a blue man, hammering it, and hammering it, and hammering it again. Here is the science bit. Bronze is an alloy. You mix copper and tin, melt them at a relatively achievable 1000 degrees Celsius, pour the liquid into a mold, and voila, you have a sword. It's consistent, it's castable, and it's hard. Iron is a nightmare. Pure iron melts at over 1,500 degrees Celsius, a temperature ancient furnaces couldn't reach. So, the Hittites weren't melting iron. They were roasting it until the slag, the rocky impurities, melted out, leaving behind a spongy mass of solid iron. To turn that sponge into something useful, you have to beat the hell out of it to squish out the remaining slag and weld the iron particles together. The result isn't steel, it's wrought iron. And here is the kicker. Wrought iron is actually softer and worse at holding an edge than good bronze. If a Hittite soldier went into battle with an early iron sword against an Egyptian with a hardened bronze koppish, the Hittite sword would likely bend after the first few hits. You'd have to stop the battle, put your sword under your boot, and bend it back into shape. Not exactly a tactical advantage, so if it wasn't a super weapon, what was it? It was bling. In the late Bronze Age, iron was the kryptonite of the elite. It was rare, it was exotic, and it was ridiculously expensive. We have price lists from the period that show iron was worth up to 40 times its weight in silver and was often more valuable than gold. Iron wasn't for killing people, it was for showing off. Kings wore iron rings. They had iron daggers with gold handles tucked into their belts. They drank from iron cups. Possessing something made of this black metal from the earth was the ultimate flex. It showed you commanded the resources and the specialized labor to produce it. But just because they did UNT have steel battalions, does UNT mean the Hittites did UNT have a monopoly? They absolutely did. They controlled the region of Kitsuatna, southeastern Turkey, which was the Silicon Valley of ancient iron production. They knew where the ore was, and they knew the secret recipe of fuel and air to create those blooms. And they guarded that secret jealously, not because they feared an arms race, but because they wanted to corner the luxury market. You can actually read the frustration of other kings in the diplomatic letters found in the archives. There is a famous letter from Hattusa III, a later Hittite king, to the king of Assyria. The Assyrian king had clearly written to him saying, "Hey brother, where is that shipment of iron you promised me?" Hattusa writes back with what is essentially the oldest check-is in the mail excuse in history. He says, "Regarding the good iron you wrote to me about, good iron is not available in my seal house in Kitsuatna right now. That is a bad time for producing iron. They are producing good iron, but they have not finished yet. When they finish, I will send it to you. Today, I am dispatching an iron dagger blade to you. It's brilliant." He blames the season, which makes no sense. Furnaces work in winter, claims supply chain issues, and sends a single dagger as a sorry for the delay gift. It proves that the Hittite kings tightly controlled the export of iron to maintain its value and their prestige. They were playing economic warfare, not military warfare, with the metal. Historians still argue whether the Hittites eventually stumbled upon the process of carburization, turning wrought iron into actual steel by baking it with charcoal to introduce carbon. There are a few iron artifacts that show traces of being hardened, suggesting they might have figured it out by accident or through experimentation. If they did, they were on the cusp of changing the world. But during the height of their empire, they were largely fighting with the same bronze weapons as everyone else. However, there is a fringe tidbit that adds a mystical layer to this. Before they mined, or the Hittites and others used meteoritic iron metal harvested from fallen space rocks. They called it the black iron of heaven. This material was naturally rich in nickel and harder than terrestrial iron. It was considered divine. When the Hittites started smelting, or from the ground, they were effectively trying to synthetically recreate the metal of the gods. It wasn't just metallurgy, it was alchemy. They were pulling the substance of the stars out of the mud. As you watch the smith hammer the bloom, sparks flying in the dim light, you realize that the Iron Age didn't start with a bang. It started here, in these sweaty workshops, with craftsmen struggling to understand a material that refused to melt. It started as a luxury trade, a plaything for kings, before it eventually became the metal that would arm the common man and drown the Bronze Age in blood. But you don't build an empire on luxury daggers. You need something that can actually break a line of infantry. You need shock and awe. And for that, the Hittites didn't look to the forge, they looked to the stable. You leave the heat of the smithy and walk across the courtyard to a much larger open-air workshop. The smell changes from charcoal to sawdust and horse manure. You see carpenters bending wood with steam. You see leather workers stitching heavy straps. And in the center of the yard, you see the chassis of a vehicle that looks less like a carriage and more like a tank. The Egyptians have their fast, sleek, Ferrara-style chariots. The Hittites, They looked at that design and said, "That's cute. Now let us put some armor on it and see how many guys we can pile into the back." You are about to inspect the Hittite heavy chariot, the weapon that actually terrified the ancient world. You walk deeper into the workshop, stepping over curls of shaved wood that litter the floor like confetti. The smell here is fantastic, a mix of cedar, elm, and wet leather. If the smithy was the place of fire and alchemy, this is the place of precision engineering. You are looking at the production line of the Bronze Age's most terrifying land vehicle. To really appreciate what the Hittites are doing here, you have to understand the competition. Picture an Egyptian chariot. It's light, elegant, made of bent wood and woven leather floors. The axle is positioned at the very rear of the platform. This design is genius for speed and maneuverability. It's a sports car. It's designed for 2 people, a driver and an archer. The Egyptian strategy is to race around the battlefield, staying out of reach, while the archer rains arrows down on the enemy like a mobile machine gun nest. It's a skirmishing weapon. It's annoying, it's deadly, but it doesn't hold ground. Now, look at what the Hittite carpenters are building in front of you. This isn't a sports car, it's an Humvee. The first thing you notice is the axle placement. The Hittite engineers have moved the axle from the rear to the center of the carrying platform. To a layman, this might seem like a minor tweak, like moving a sofa 2 inches to the left. To a structural engineer, it changes everything. By centering the axle, the wheels carry the majority of the weight, rather than the horses' necks. Why does that matter? Because it means you can pack more weight onto the platform without breaking the horses' backs. And the Hittites love adding weight. They reinforced the floor, and most importantly, they changed the crew capacity. While everyone else in the Near East is rolling with a two-woman crew driver and shooter, the Hittites invented the concept of the third man. They call him the SL Zeus, literally, the third one on the horse. This guy is the game changer. In the Hittite chariot, you have your driver, who is arguably the most skilled person in the vehicle. You have your warrior, armed with a spear or a sword, not just a bow, and you have a dedicated shield bearer. This third guy's entire job is to cover the other 2 with a massive shield. This means the Hittite chariot doesn't have to stay at a distance. It doesn't have to circle the edges of the battle taking potshots. It can drive straight into the arrow storm. The shield bearer absorbs the incoming fire, while the driver slams the heavy vehicle directly into the enemy infantry lines. This is a shift from standoff warfare to shock warfare. The Hittite chariot is a battering ram. The sheer kinetic energy of this heavy vehicle, hitting a line of foot soldiers at 20 miles per hour, is devastating. Bones break, formations shatter, morale evaporates. Once they crash into the line, the Hittites can fight from the high ground of the platform, stabbing down with long spears while being protected by their human tank armor. Historians still argue about what happened after the crash. Did the warriors stay on the chariot and fight from the platform like drive-by stabbers? Or did the chariot act as a battle taxi, dropping the heavy infantry deep behind enemy lines to dismount and fight on foot, causing chaos from the inside? It's the cavalry versus dragoon debate of the ancient world. The reliefs show them fighting from the car, but the logic of a chaotic melee suggests they might have jumped off. Maybe it was both, depending on how brave they felt that morning. As you run your hand along the rim of a wheel, you notice another brilliant detail. The wheels aren't solid wood, which would be heavy and prone to cracking, and they aren't. The simple 4-spoked wheels of earlier times, these are 6-spoked wheels, expertly joined. The rim is made of bent wood, but it's covered in a thick tire of rawhide leather. This leather, when dried, becomes hard as plastic, but retains just enough give to act as a shock absorber. It's a run-flat tire. It protects the wood from the rocks of the Anatolian plateau. Here is a quirky detail that shows the level of obsession involved. The wood for these chariots was just chopped down and used. It was harvested from specific trees that were bent while they were still growing to create the natural curve needed for the wheel rims. They were bioengineering their materials years in advance. It's slow-motion manufacturing. But there is a downside to this heavy design, and you can probably guess what it is. The turning radius is terrible. An Egyptian chariot can spin on a dime. A Hittite chariot turns like a bus. If they miss their target or get flanked, they are in big trouble. They can't zip away. This means the Hittite charioteers have to be incredibly disciplined. They have to commit. Once the charge starts, there is no it's do or die. You watch a team of workers, hoisting the finished body onto the axle. It creaks. It's heavy. You wonder what kind of animal can pull this thing. A standard Bronze Age pony would take one look at this beast and go on strike. The horses of this era weren't the massive Clydesdales or Percherons we have today. They were smaller, wiry, closer to modern Arabians or Mongolian ponies. To get 3 men, heavy armor, and a wooden tank moving at combat speed, you don't just need a horse. You need an athlete. You need an animal that has been trained to the absolute limit of its physical endurance. The Hittites knew this. They knew that their fancy heavy chariots were essentially expensive lawn ornaments without the engine to pull them. So they didn't just invent a new way to build cars, they invented a new way to build horses. You leave the carpenter's shop and head toward the royal stables. The smell of sawdust fades, replaced by the pungent, earthy scent of thousands of horses. The noise is different. Here's snorting, hoofbeats, and the shouting of trainers. But they aren't shouting in Niseli, they are shouting in a different language, likely a dialect of Indo-Aryan, similar to Sanskrit. That's because the man in charge of this operation isn't a Hittite, he's a foreigner. He's a master horse trainer named Kikuli from the land of Mitanni. And he has written a training manual that is so grueling, so scientifically precise, and so effective that it is still studied by equine experts today. You are about to read the world's first sports medicine textbook. And let me tell you, if you think your CrossFit routine is intense, you wouldn't last a week in Kikuli's boot camp. You are standing in the mud of the royal paddock, and the first thing you notice is that these horses look miserable. They are sweating, their ribs are showing, and they are covered in blankets despite the heat. If a modern PETA representative walked in here, they would probably faint. But the man barking orders in the center of the ring, a foreigner named Kikuli, isn't interested in the horse's feelings. He is interested in their lungs. You are witnessing the implementation of the Kikuli text, a set of 4 clay tablets discovered in the Hattusa archives that holds the title of the world. Soldis Manual on Horse Training. It dates back to around 1400 BCE, and it is a testament to just how seriously the Hittites took their chariot program. They didn't just guess how to train a warhorse, they imported a consultant. Kikuli was a Mitannian, a person from the neighboring kingdom that was famous for its horsemanship, and the Hittites essentially hired him as a head coach to overhaul their cavalry. The program he outlines is a brutal 7-month boot camp. It begins in the autumn and runs through the winter, which explains why the horses are blanketed. Kikuli is obsessed with weight management. He believes correctly. It turns out that a grassed horse is too fat and watery to sustain the explosive energy needed for a chariot charge. He wants them lean. He wants them dry. As you watch the grooms leading the horses around the track, you realize you are seeing the invention of interval training. This is high-intensity interval training, HIIT, 3,000 years before it became a trend at your local gym. Kikuli doesn't just tell them to run, the tablets are incredibly specific. Canter for 2 furlongs, walk for 1, trotting for 3. Then he orders them to be untied and walked again. It's all about heart rate recovery. By pushing the horse to its limit and then forcing it to walk, he is conditioning the cardiovascular system to recover quickly. He's building an engine that can sprint into battle, crash into an enemy line, and then have enough oxygen left in the blood to keep fighting or retreat. But the training isn't just physical, it's psychological. You watch as a groom leads a team of horses into the river at night. It's freezing. Kikuli orders them to swim the horses against the current. This builds muscle without the impact stress of running on hard ground, but it also desensitizes the animals to cold, dark, and uncomfortable water. A horse that has swum a freezing river at midnight isn't going to panic when it has to ford a stream during a battle. Now, here is the linguistic quirk that sends shivers down the spines of philologists. As Kikuli shouts the number of laps the horses need to run, he isn't using Hittite words. He uses terms like Ekwartana 1 turn, Terawartana 3 turns, Panzawartana 5 turns. If you speak any Indo-European language, those numbers should sound eerily familiar. Ika sounds like Eka in Sanskrit 1. Tera sounds like 3 or tri. Panza is Panka 5, or the Greek penta. These are Indo-Aryan loanwords. It's S, the smoking gun that proves the elite chariot class of the Near East shared a common cultural or linguistic heritage that stretched all the way to India. Standing here in a muddy field in Turkey, hearing a guy count to 5, in a language that is a cousin to both English and Sanskrit, is a reminder of how interconnected this ancient world really is. But back to the horses. The diet Kikuli prescribes is strictly controlled. No fresh grass, only barley and dry hay. He wants to dry out the animal's tissues. He is effectively putting them on a keto diet for equines. The result is a horse that looks skeletal to the untrained eye, but is actually pure muscle and tendon. These animals aren't pets. They are biological machines designed to pull a heavy three-man killing box. Historians still argue about one specific aspect of the text involving washing. Kikuli frequently orders the horses to be washed with warm water. Some scholars think this was a literal bath to remove sweat and prevent chill's basic hygiene. Others argue it refers to a steam bath or a specific pouring ritual to induce sweating, further dehydrating the horse to make it leaner. Was it a spa day or a sauna torture session? Given the rest of the regimen, the smart money is on the torture. The text also includes what might be the first recorded instance of tapering before a big event. As the training cycle nears its end, the intensity drops. Kikuli allows the horses to rest more, to eat a little more. He wants them to peak exactly when the campaigning season starts in the spring. It's sports science, pure and simple. He is managing their fatigue levels so they don't burn out before the war even begins. You watch a Finnish team being hitched to one of those heavy chariots we saw earlier. The difference is immediate. These horses don't struggle against the weight. They lean into the yoke with a grim determination. Their muscles ripple under their thin skin. They don't spook at the noise of the bronze bits clanking. They are ready. This combination, the heavy three-man chariot and the hyper-conditioned, interval-trained horse, gave the Hittites a tactical advantage that was terrifying. While an Egyptian chariot relied on speed and evasion, a Hittite chariot could simply outlast and outmuscle the opposition. They could cover ground faster than heavy infantry and hit harder than light cavalry. But having a Ferrari doesn't make you a good driver, and having a tank doesn't make you a general. The Hittite military machine was formidable, but it was also expensive. Training a horse for 7 months costs a fortune in grain. Building those chariots takes skilled labor. You can't risk these assets on a whim. You need to make sure that when you go to war, it's for a good reason. That is where the scribes come in. The Hittites weren't just brutes who smashed things. They were lawyers who smashed things. Before they unleashed Kikuli's horses, they unleashed a weapon that was just as sharp, their bureaucracy. You leave the stables, wiping the mud from your sandals, and head back up to the citadel. You are going to the royal archive, the brain of the empire. Here, stacked on wooden shelves, are thousands of clay tablets that record the conversations between the great kings of the world. You are about to read the mail of the most powerful men on earth. And you're going to find out that ancient diplomacy was unto all noble speeches and formal treaties. A lot of it was petty, passive-aggressive bickering about gold, gifts, and who forgot to send a get-well-soon card. You step out of the blinding Anatolian sun and into the cool, shadowed interior of the royal archive on the citadel of Bekakal. The air here is still and smells faintly of Earth's thousands of drying clay tablets stacked on wooden shelves like the world's heaviest library. You are standing in the nerve center of the Bronze Age internet. This is where the Hittite kings sent and received their emails. Although the download speeds were determined by how fast a donkey could walk from here to Thebes. You pick up a tablet carefully, please. It's a national treasure, and squint at the cuneiform wedges. You might expect these letters to be filled with lofty declarations of war or divine poetry. Instead, you are reading what essentially amounts to a passive-aggressive text message thread between the most powerful men on the planet. Welcome to the Club of Great Powers. In the late Bronze Age, the kings of Hatti, Egypt, Babylon, and later Assyria formed an exclusive international brotherhood. They addressed each other as my brother. They inquired about each other's health. They exchanged expensive gifts. But if you read between the lines, you realize that this brotherhood was basically a high school clique, ruled by pettiness, jealousy, and constant bickering over money. The standard opening of these letters is always the same. A diplomatic copy-paste job, say to my brother, the king of Egypt. Thus says the king of Hatti, your brother. With me, all is well. With you, may all be well. With your wives, your sons, your household, your horses, your chariots, and your troops, may all be very, very well. It's polite, it's formal, and it's usually followed immediately by a complaint. One of the most common topics, gold. The Hittites and Babylonians were shameless gold diggers when it came to their relationship with Egypt. They knew the pharaohs had access to the mines of Nubia, and they weren't afraid to beg. You find letters that basically say, "Hey brother, why was the gold you sent me last year so impure? It looked like dust. Send me more, and make it the good stuff this time." After all, gold is as common as dirt in your land, right? It's the ancient equivalent of asking your rich friend to pay for dinner because he can afford it. But the real drama comes when someone new tries to join the club. You wander over to a shelf containing correspondence from the east. The Hittites were watching the rise of Assyria with deep suspicion. For a long time, the Assyrians were vassals, minor players. Then they started conquering. The Assyrian king, Adad-nir-rai, feeling confident after smashing the Mitanni the Hittites' former rivals, decided he was ready for the big leagues. He sent a letter to the Hittite king, effectively saying, "Hey brother, I conquered your enemies, so we're equals now. I'm sending you a nice gift. Let's be friends." The Hittite response is legendary. It is the diplomatic equivalent of a slap in the face. The Hittite king writes back, "Why do you keep talking about brotherhood? For what reason should I write to you about brotherhood? Were you and I born of the same mother? As my father and grandfather did not write to the king of Assyria about brotherhood, you shall not keep writing to me about it, and great kinging me. It displeases me." And then comes the kill shot, a line so petty it echoes through the millennia. Did we manage a campfire together? Essentially meaning, did we ever hang out? Did we herd sheep together? No. So shut up and stay in your lane. Historians still argue whether this specific letter was written by Muwatalli II or his successor, Urhitshab. But the sentiment is clear: the Hittites were the gatekeepers of the international order. They decided who was a great king and who was just a warlord with a lucky streak. They used these tablets to police the hierarchy of the Near East without having to hitch up a single chariot. However, there is a quirky human side to this correspondence, too. It wasn't all insults and gold begging. They acted like a dysfunctional extended family. They sent doctors to each other. If the king of Babylon had a toothache, he'd write to the Hittite king asking for a specialist. If the Hittite king needed a sculptor, he'd ask the pharaoh to send one on loan. There is a fringe theory that suggests this network of brotherhood was actually a form of early international law, designed specifically to prevent the total collapse of trade. By framing their relationships as familial, they created a taboo against total war. You can fight your brother, you can beat him up, but you generally don't burn his house down and salt the earth usually. It was a way to keep the conflicts contained, ensuring that the luxury goods kept flowing even when armies were on the march. But the most fascinating part of these archives isn't just what they say, but the language they are written in. You scan the shelves and realize that almost none of these international letters are in Neseli, the Hittite language. They are in Akkadian. Akkadian was the lingua franca of the day, the English of the Bronze Age. It was the language of Babylon. This means that a Hittite scribe in Hattusa had to learn a completely different language with a staggeringly complex writing system. Just to talk to an Egyptian scribe, who also had to learn that same foreign language, it created a class of international elites, the scribes who held the keys to global communication. These guys were the real power behind the throne. They could subtly alter the tone of a message, softening an insult or sharpening a threat, depending on how they translated the king's angry shouting into the formal Akkadian script. As you place the tablet back on the shelf, you get a sense of the precarious balance the Hittites were maintaining. They were juggling egos. They were managing a massive multi-ethnic empire while trying to keep the Assyrians down. The Egyptians happy and the Babylonians quiet. It was a house of cards built on clay. The diplomacy was holding the world together, but only just. The letters show a Hittite empire that is confident, arrogant even, but also stretched thin. They are constantly putting out diplomatic fires. Why didn't you send the horses? Why did your border guards detain my merchant? Why did you accept a refugee from my land? The system required a strong hand to keep it running. It needed a king who could back up the snarky letters with iron and blood. The Hittites had been lucky with a few strong rulers, but the man who was about to take the stage would redefine what it meant to be a great king. He wouldn't just write to the brothers, he would make them fear him. You leave the archives and walk toward the edge of the citadel. The sun is setting, casting the shadow of the palace over the valley. The bloody years are over. The laws are written, the gods are fed, the chariots are heavy, the letters are sent. The stage is perfectly set for the arrival of the greatest villain or hero. Depending on your perspective in Hittite history, you are about to meet Suppiluliuma. Even his name sounds heavy, like a boulder rolling down a hill. He is the man who will take this kingdom and turn it into an empire that rivals Egypt. But he didn't get there by being a brother. He got there by being a usurper, a manipulator, and a military genius who knew exactly when to put down the clay tablet and pick up the spear. You are standing in a military encampment on the banks of the Euphrates. But this isn't the desperate, dusty scramble of the early raids. This is a city of tense, ordered, disciplined, and terrifyingly quiet. In the center sits a pavilion that is larger than most houses. Inside, poring over maps of Syria by the light of an oil lamp, is a man whose name dominates the history of the late Bronze Age like a thunderclap. Suppiluliuma. Just saying his name feels like a workout. Suppiluliuma. It literally translates to "he of the pure spring," which is ironic because the man is currently wading knee-deep through a river of blood. You are looking at the figure who single-handedly dragged the Hittite Empire back from the brink of extinction and turned it into the heavyweight champion of the Near East. If Mercelli was the daring adventurer and Telepinu was the thoughtful lawyer, Suppiluliuma is the godfather. He is the ultimate operator, charismatic, ruthless, and possessing a geopolitical intellect that makes Machiavelli look like he was writing children's books. But here's the dark secret hanging over this tent. He isn't supposed to be here. He isn't the rightful king. A few years ago, the Hittite homeland was on fire. Historians call it the concentric invasion. The Casca were burning the northern temples. The Arzaha lands in the west were rebelling. The Isua in the east were raiding. The capital, Hattusa, was actually sacked and burned. The Hittite state was effectively a bird in a cage, trapped and pecking at the bars. The king at the time was Tudalia III, and his designated heir was a man known as Tudalia the Younger. Suppiluliuma was just the general. He was the guy doing the dirty work, winning the battles, and saving the country, while the royals sat in the palace. But when the old king died, Suppiluliuma decided that the younger wasn't cut out for the job, in a move that would haunt his family for generations. Suppiluliuma murdered the rightful heir, his own brother or nephew. The relationship is a bit fuzzy in the text sans seized the throne. Historians still argue whether this was a naked power grab by a sociopath or a necessary evil to save the state. Supporters argue that without Suppiluliuma's iron will, the Hittites would have been wiped off the map by their enemies. Detractors point out that murdering your kin is generally a bad way to start a reign, especially in a culture that believes sins are physically contagious. But looking at him now, confident and commanding, it's hard to argue with results. He didn't just push the enemies back, he crushed them. He spent 20 years playing a game of whack-a-mole on the Anatolian plateau. He smashed the Arzawa in the west. He drove the Casca back into their mountains. And now, he has turned his eyes south, toward the great prize, the kingdom of Mitanni. The Mitanni are the other superpower in the region, famous for their horsemen and their alliance with Egypt. They are the barrier stopping Hittite expansion. Suppiluliuma decides to break them. But he doesn't just charge in, he plays a game of 4D chess. He creates a distraction in the west, luring the Mitanni army out of position, and then marches his army through the difficult terrain of the Antitaurus Mountains at a speed that seems impossible. He crosses the Euphrates before the Mitanni king Tushratta even knows he's left home. It's a blitzkrieg. Suppiluliuma bypasses the strongholds and goes straight for the Mitanni capital, Washukani. Tushratta panics and flees without a fight. The great Mitanni Empire, the buffer state that had balanced the power of the Near East for centuries, collapses like a flan in a cupboard. You watch as Suppiluliuma redraws the map. He doesn't just conquer, he installs puppet kings. He marries his daughters to local warlords to ensure their loyalty. He is building a network of vassal states that insulates the Hittite homeland from attack. He is creating a Pax Hathitica through sheer intimidation. There is a quirky, almost comical detail about his relationship with the Babylonians during this time. While he is busy dismantling empires, he keeps up a correspondence with the Kassite king of Babylon that is surprisingly touchy-feely. He marries a Babylonian princess to secure his southern flank. But this princess, known as the Tawanana, brings her own drama. She introduces new, strange rituals to the court and starts spending money like water. The conservative Hittite priests hate her. Suppiluliuma doesn't care. As long as Babylon stays quiet, his wife can buy all the gold statues she wants. But despite the victories, there is a shadow in the king's eyes. You can see it as he dictates letters to his scribes. It's the shadow of his usurpation. In the ancient world, you can't escape the judgment of the gods. Later texts written by his son Murseli II will explicitly claim that all the bad things that happen later, the plagues, the early deaths, are the gods punishing the house of Suppiluliuma for the murder of Tuttaliya the Younger. It's a guilt that eats away at the dynasty, a blood curse that no amount of military glory can wash away. Right now, though, Suppiluliuma is untouchable. He is camped before the mighty city of Carchemish in Syria, laying siege to the last stronghold of resistance. The entire Near East is holding its breath. The Egyptians are watching nervously from the south. The Assyrians are watching greedily from the east. Suppiluliuma is the apex predator. And then a messenger arrives. It's not a soldier covered in mud. It's an envoy from Egypt. This is strange. Egypt and Hatti are technically enemies, or at least cold rivals. The envoy is carrying a letter, but it's not a declaration of war. It's not a trade dispute. It is, without a doubt, the most bizarre diplomatic document ever found in the ancient world. You watch Suppiluliuma read the tablet. He frowns. He reads it again. He looks at his generals, then back at the tablet. He literally says to his council, "Such a thing has never happened to me in my whole life." The letter is a marriage proposal. But not just any marriage proposal. It is a desperate plea from the Queen of Egypt. Her husband, the pharaoh, has just died. She has no sons. She is surrounded by enemies in her own court who want to seize the throne, and she is asking no begging Suppiluliuma to send one of his sons to marry her. She writes, "I will never marry one of my servant's subjects. Send me a son of yours, and he will be my husband and king of Egypt." Let that sink in. The Queen of Egypt is offering to unite the two greatest superpowers of the age. She is offering to put a Hittite prince on the throne of the pharaohs. If Suppiluliuma says yes, his grandson could rule an empire stretching from the Black Sea to the Sudan. It would be a United States of the Bronze Age. It would change human history forever. Suppiluliuma is suspicious. He's a cynic. He thinks it's a trap. Why doesn't she marry an Egyptian? He asks. He sends an envoy to Egypt to check if she's lying. He wastes months dithering. But as you stand there in the tent, watching the king debate with his generals, you want to scream at him. Do it. Send the boy. This is the win condition. But Suppiluliuma is cautious. He eventually agrees, but the delay, the delay is fatal. He chooses his son, Zanenza. You see the young prince being prepped for the journey. He is dressed in the finest robes, given a royal escort. He rides out of the camp, heading south toward the Nile, dreaming of becoming pharaoh. He will never make it. And the consequences of that failed road trip are going to unleash a storm that will nearly destroy the very empire. Suppiluliuma spent his life building. The great king has conquered the world, but he is about to learn that you can't conquer bacteria and you can't outmaneuver a grieving widow's enemies. You are looking at a clay tablet that represents one of the biggest what-if moments in human history. If Suppiluliuma had just said yes immediately, you might be living in a world where the Hittite and Egyptian empires merged into a single superstate, potentially preserving the Bronze Age civilization against the coming collapse. But he didn't. He hesitated. And as you watch the events unfold from the perspective of a fly on the tent wall, the tragedy of the situation feels almost Shakespearean. The letter itself is a masterpiece of desperation. The sender is referred to in the Hittite texts only as Dahamunzu. For decades, historians scratched their heads over this name. It doesn't sound Egyptian. It doesn't sound Hittite. It turns out, Dahamunzu is a garbled Hittite transliteration of the Egyptian title Tometnesu, which simply means the king's wife. So, who is she? Most scholars now agree she is Ankhesenomen, the widow of the boy king Tutankhamun. Just picture her situation. Her husband dies young. She has no surviving children, only those tragic stillborn daughters found in Tut's tomb. The shark tank of the Egyptian court is circling. There is an old, powerful official named Ahu, is possibly her own grandfather, eyeing the throne. There is the General Horemheb, who commands the army. She is terrified. She knows that if she doesn't secure a king of her own choosing, she will be forced to marry one of these servants, effectively legitimizing their coup and ending her family's dynasty. so she writes to the enemy. She writes to the man who has been beating up on Egypt's vassals for years. My husband has died. A son I have not. But to you, they say, the sons are many. If you would give me one son of yours, he would become my husband. Never shall I pick out a servant of mine and make him my husband. I am afraid. You can hear the fear in that last line. I am afraid. It's a rare moment of vulnerability in the hyper-formal world of royal correspondence. But Suppiluliuma, standing in his tent at Carchemish, is too cynical to hear the fear. He only hears a trap. He thinks, since when do Egyptians marry foreigners? And he's right to be skeptical. The pharaohs never gave their daughters to foreign kings, and they certainly never imported foreign kings to sit on the throne of Horus. It was culturally taboo. The pharaoh was a god. You can't just fly in a guy from Turkey and call him a god. So, instead of sending a prince, Suppiluliuma sends a chamberlain named Hattusa to investigate. He tells him, go and bring me back the truth. Maybe they have a prince of their own, and they are just trying to trick me. You watch the seasons change while Hattusa travels all the way to Thebes and back. It takes months. Meanwhile, Enki-Zenemin is sitting in the palace, watching I get closer and closer to the crown. When Hattusa finally returns to the Hittite camp, he brings another letter, and this one is furious. The queen writes, why did you say they are deceiving me? If I had a son, would I have written about my own and my country's shame to a foreign land? You did not believe me. He who was my husband has died. A son I have not. I shall not take a servant of mine and make him my husband. To you I have written. They say, your sons are many. Give me one of your sons, and he will be my husband and king over Egypt. Suppiluliuma finally gets it. He realizes this is real. You can see the ambition light up in his eyes. He is about to pull off the ultimate diplomatic victory. He gathers his council. He talks about how the Egyptians and Hittites used to be friends. He decides to send his son, Zenanza. You watch Zenanza pack his bags. He's young, probably in his early 20s. He's going to be the pharaoh. He rides out of the camp with a retinue of guards and gifts, heading south toward the border. The mood is celebratory. The war is effectively over. The two empires are about to become family, but they never arrive. Somewhere near the border, perhaps in the rocky passes of the Levant, the caravan is ambushed. It wasn't bandits, it was a hit. The news trickles back to Suppiluliuma slowly, and when it hits, it breaks him. The people of Egypt killed Zenanza. Historians still argue about who pulled the trigger. The prime suspect is Ai. He had the most to gain. With the Hittite prince dead, Enki-Zenemin was forced to marry Ai, who then became pharaoh. Horemheb is another suspect. He was a nationalist general who would have been disgusted by the idea of a Hittite ruling Egypt. Whoever did it, they didn't just kill a prince. They killed the peace. Suppilulium's grief turns instantly into a cold, terrifying rage. The texts record his words, the gods of my land. I did not do evil, yet the people of Egypt did this to me. He invokes the sun god and the storm god as witnesses. He abandons diplomacy. He orders his son Arnawanda to unleash hell. This isn't a strategic campaign anymore. It's a punishment beating. The Hittite army surges into Egyptian-controlled territory in Syria, specifically the region of Amka. They burn the villages, they slaughter the livestock, they take thousands of prisoners. It is a massacre fueled by a father's broken heart. But here's the fringe tidbit that makes this tragedy even darker. Some Egyptologists suggest that Enki-Zenemin did Anchis disappear after marrying Ai. There is evidence she might have tried to resist until the very end, possibly even being murdered herself or erased from history shortly after the wedding. The Hittite marriage was her last roll of the dice to save herself, and when Zenanza died, she was doomed. Suppiluliuma feels justified. He has avenged his son. The Hittite army marches back north, their wagons loaded with loot and thousands of Egyptian prisoners of war. These prisoners are the currency of victory. They will be used as slave labor to build temples, work the fields, and serve the nobles. You stand at the gates of Hattusa as the victorious army returns. The people are cheering. The king rides in, looking grim but triumphant. He has crushed the Mitanni, he has punished the Egyptians, and he has secured the empire. He is at the absolute height of his power. But as you look closer at the column of prisoners trudging in chains, you notice something wrong. Some of them are stumbling, some of them are coughing, some of them have strange, swollen lumps on their necks and groins. The Hittites think they are bringing home slaves. They don't realize they are importing a biological time bomb. The Egyptian affair didn't end with Zananza's death. The Egyptians, or perhaps the conditions of the war camp, have cultivated an invisible assassin. Superpower, the man who defeated armies, outsmarted kings, and rewrote the map of the Middle East, is about to face an enemy he can't stab and he can't negotiate with. The cheers of the crowd are about to be replaced by the wailing of mourners. You might want to cover your mouth and step back from the procession, because the plague prayers are about to begin, and the golden age of the Hittites is going to rot from the inside out. You are standing in the streets of Hattusa, but the triumphant cheering has died down. The victory parade has ended, the Egyptian prisoners have been marched off to their labor camps, and a heavy, suffocating silence has settled over the city. It's not the silence of peace, it's the silence of a house where someone is dying in the next room. The air feels thick. The smell of roasting meat from the temples has been replaced by the acrid smoke of funeral pyres, burning day and night. You watch as a neighbor you saw cheering yesterday stumbles in the street. He's clutching his neck. If you were to look closer, which you definitely shouldn't, you would see swollen, tender lumps under his jaw and in his groin. He is burning with fever. He coughs, and it sounds wet and ragged. By tomorrow, he will be dead. By next week, his wife and children will follow. The invisible enemy has arrived. The Egyptian prisoners brought more than just their labor. They brought a pathogen that had been brewing in the filth of the war camps in the Levant. And because the Hittites have no concept of germ theory only, a belief in divine punishment, they have no way to stop it. They don't quarantine. They pray. They flock to the temples, crowding together to beg the gods for mercy, which, ironically, only helps the bacterium spread faster. This isn't just a bad flu season. This is a demographic catastrophe. The Hittite plague will rage for 20 years. It will empty entire villages. It will leave the fields unharvested because there is no one left to hold the scythe. The army, the pride of the empire, is decimated. The garrisons on the frontiers go silent because the soldiers are dead in their bunks. But the plague doesn't care about rank. It climbs the steps of the royal citadel. It slips past the lion gate and into the private chambers of the palace. First, it comes for the great king Superpower. The man who reshaped the Near East, who defied pharaohs and crushed empires, falls ill. You can imagine the panic in the court. The best doctors are summoned, bringing their poultices and their incantations. The Hattusa women burn their wool and smash their clay puppies. But the he of the pure spring cannot be purified. The conqueror dies, gasping for air in his own bed, defeated by an enemy he couldn't even see. The throne passes to his eldest son, Arnawanda II. The court tries to rally. The king is dead. Long live the king. But Arnawanda is already coughing. He rules for maybe a year, perhaps less, spending his entire reign on his deathbed. Then he dies too. You are witnessing a decapitation of the state. In the span of a few years, the empire loses its legendary founder and his heir. The crown now falls to the youngest son, a man named Mercelli II. You watch Mercelli take the throne. He is young, inexperienced, and terrified. He looks out at a kingdom that is literally rotting. The vassal kings in the west are rebelling because they smell weakness. The Casca in the north are raiding again because the border forts are empty. Mercelli should be crushed by this. He should be the king who presides over the collapse. But Mercelli too is different. He is introspective, he is deeply religious, and he leaves behind one of the most haunting texts in human history, the Plague Prayers. You can read these tablets today. They aren't the boastful propaganda of a warrior king. They are the desperate, confused pleas of a man trying to understand why the universe hates him. "Oh gods," he writes, "what have I done? The land of Hatti is dying. No one is left to prepare the bread and wine for you. The plowmen are dead, the women are dead. If you kill everyone, who will worship you?" It's a chillingly pragmatic argument to use on a god. Stop killing us, or you'll starve too. Mercelli starts digging through the archives, the very archives we visited, looking for a reason. He believes the plague is a judgment for a specific sin. He finds two possibilities. First, the broken treaty with Egypt, the murder of Zananza, and the subsequent war. Second, and more personally, the murder of Tudaleya, the younger, by his father, Superpower. He confesses to the murder on behalf of his dad. "It is true," he writes, "my father did this evil thing, but I did not do it. Why do you punish me? It is a moment of raw psychological agony. He organizes massive expiation rituals, sending expensive gifts to the temples, begging for the plague to lift. So, what was this disease? For a long time, historians just called it plague, which is a catch-all term for lots of people dying. Some thought it was bubonic plague, Yersinia pestis, but the symptoms described didn't quite match, and the timeline was a bit early. Others guessed malaria or smallpox. But recently, a new suspect has emerged, and it fits the details perfectly. Tularemia, also known as rabbit fever, is a bacterial infection caused by Francisella tularensis. It spreads through ticks, flies, and contact with infected animals like the livestock the Hittites stole. The symptoms: skin ulcers, swollen lymph nodes, fever, and respiratory failure. It is highly infectious and can linger in the soil and water. It fits the Hittite description of a disease that moved from animals to humans and lingered for decades. Now, here is the quirky, dark-fringed tidbit that makes the Hittites sound like modern soup billings. As the plague dragged on, the Hittites realized that the sickness wasn't just a curse, it was a weapon. There are texts that suggest they engaged in the earliest known form of biological warfare. When the western lands of Arsawa rebelled, thinking the Hittites were too sick to fight, the Hittite commanders didn't just send troops. They sent rams. But these weren't gift rams, they were infected rams. They would drive these sick animals toward the enemy lines, or into enemy territory. The texts explicitly say, "The Lord God of the oath, together with this ram, will break the bone of your leg." It's a way of delivering the pathogen directly to the enemy's food supply and livestock. They were weaponizing their own tragedy. If we're going down, you're coming with us. Historians still argue about the intentionality of this. Was it a calculated biological strike, or was it a ritual transfer of the curse that just happened to have the side effect of infecting the enemy? Given how pragmatic the Hittites were, it's likely a bit of both. They viewed the disease as a supernatural force, but they knew exactly how to aim it. Despite the prayers and the rams, the plague burns on. It reshapes the empire. Mursili II spends his entire reign fighting a two-front war, one against the rebels on the borders and one against the bacteria at home. The fact that he managed to hold the empire together at all is a miracle. He had to rely on diplomacy more than brute force because he simply didn't have the manpower for massive campaigns. He had to be smarter, faster, and more ruthless. You watch him age prematurely. The stress is etched on his face. He has speech impediments. He describes a stroke or a nervous breakdown where his mouth went sideways and he could unspeak. But he survives. The plague eventually burns itself out, leaving a scarred, depopulated, but still standing empire. As the sickness fades, the Hittites look south again. The Egyptians have recovered from their own chaotic dynastic struggles. A new dynasty has risen, the Ramessids, and they are looking at the weakened Hittite state with hungry eyes. They want their territory back. They want Syria. The stage is being set for a collision that makes the previous skirmishes look like bar fights. The new Hittite king Muwatalli, Mursili's son, is going to have to face the biggest ego in the ancient world, Ramesses II, and he's going to do it at a place called Kadesh. You might want to grab your helmet and check your seatbelt, because we are marching toward the largest chariot battle in human history. The plague years are over. The War of the Kings is about to begin. You are marching south again, but this time, the air feels different. It isn't the desperate scramble of the early raids or the mournful trudge of the plague years. This is the heavy, rhythmic stomp of the largest army the Bronze Age has ever seen. You are surrounded by 40,000 men. The ground literally shakes under the hooves of 3,700 chariots. You are part of a military organism that stretches for miles, a serpent of bronze and leather winding its way through the Syrian hills. The year is approximately 1274 BCE. The plague has burned itself out. The population has recovered just enough, and the Hittite Empire is done playing defense. Leading this massive host is King Muwatalli II. You look at him riding in his chariot, and he cuts a very different figure from his father Mursili. Mursili was the pious sufferer, the man who begged the gods for mercy. Muwatalli is a man of action. He is stoic, calculating, and seemingly immune to panic. He has done something that baffled his contemporaries and still puzzles historians today. He moved the capital, that's right, he abandoned Hattusa. He packed up the gods, the archives, and the court, and moved them south to a new city called Hattusa. Historians still argue furiously about why he did this. Was it religious devotion to the storm god? Was it fear of the Casca tribes raiding the north? Or was it purely strategic a way to position his command center closer to the inevitable war with Egypt? Moving a capital is a logistical nightmare, but Muwatalli did it because he knew what was coming. He knew who was coming. He is marching to meet a man who needs no introduction, largely because he spent his entire life writing his own introduction on every flat surface in Egypt. Ramesses II, Ramesses the Great, if Muwatalli is the grandmaster chess player. Ramesses is the quarterback who won the Super Bowl in his rookie year and, whoa, unstopped talking about it. He is young, incredibly handsome, and terrifyingly ambitious. He has just taken the throne, and he wants to make a statement. He wants to restore the Egyptian borders of the old days. He wants the wealthy city-states of Syria back under Pharaoh's sandal. Specifically, he wants the city of Kadesh. Kadesh is the flashpoint. It's a fortress city sitting on the Orontes River in modern-day Syria. It controls the trade routes. Whoever holds Kadesh holds the keys to the ancient economy. It has flipped back and forth between Egyptian and Hittite control for decades, like a rope in a tugafor. Now Ramesses is marching north with 20,000 men to take it back once and for all. But Ramesses has a fatal flaw. He believes his own hype. You are moving with the Hittite army, but you aren't marching openly. Muwatalli is pulling off a masterclass in operational security. He is keeping this massive force hidden behind the ridges and valleys of the Lebanon mountains. It's hard to hide 40,000 people, but he's doing it. He wants Ramesses to think he is still hundreds of miles away in the north, shivering in fear. As you approach the vicinity of Kadesh, Muwatalli plays his ace card. He sends out 2 spies, but these aren't Hittite agents in disguise. They are local Bedouin tribesmen, known as the Shasu. They allow themselves to be captured by the Egyptians. You can imagine the scene in the Egyptian camp. Ramesses is sitting on his golden throne, feeling invincible. His soldiers bring in these 2 captured Bedouins. Ramesses asks, where is the vile enemy of Hatti? The Shasu, sticking perfectly to Muwatalli's script, lie through their teeth. "Oh, great pharaoh," they say, bowing low, "the king of Hatti is terrified of you. He heard you were coming and he ran away. He is currently sitting in Aleppo, way to the north, shaking in his boots." Ramesses buys it, hook, line, and sinker. Why wouldn't he? It confirms exactly what he already thinks, that he is the scariest man on earth. Believing the coast is clear, Ramesses makes a catastrophic error. He splits his army. He abandons caution. He races ahead with only his lead division, the division of Ammon, to set up camp at Kadesh and start the siege. He leaves his other 3 divisions, Ra Patah and Sethstrung, out miles behind him on the road. He effectively turns his army into a long, thin, vulnerable noodle. Meanwhile, you are standing with Muwatalli on the eastern bank of the Orontes River. You are not in Aleppo. You are right here. You are literally just on the other side of the city mound of Kadesh. This is the old man of the mountain trick. The city of Kadesh sits on a hill. Ramesses is camped on the west side. The entire Hittite army is hiding on the east side. The city itself blocks the line of sight. It's like a cartoon scene where 2 characters are leaning against opposite sides of the same tree, unaware of each other, except one of them is holding a heavy bronze axe and knows exactly where the other one is. The tension in the Hittite ranks is unbearable. The horses are twitching. The soldiers are checking their weapons for the 100th time. You can hear the faint sounds of the Egyptians setting up their camp across the river, the hammering of tent pegs, the laughing of soldiers who think they are on a vacation. They have unhitched their horses. They are cooking dinner. They have no idea that the angel of death is waiting 500 yards away. But then, a glitch in the matrix. The Egyptian scouts captured 2 real Hittite spies. Not the Shasu actors, but actual Hittite intelligence officers who were scouting the river. Ramesses decides to interrogate them, and by interrogate, the Egyptian records specify beating with sticks. Under torture, the truth comes out. Where is he? Ramesses screams. The battered spy gasps out the words that turn Ramesses's blood to ice. Behold, the king of Hatti has arrived. He is with his infantry and his chariots. They are more numerous than the sands of the shore. And behold, they are standing armed and ready right behind the old city of Kadesh. Ramesses looks up. He realizes he is alone. His backup is miles away, and just as that realization hits him, he hears a sound like thunder rolling across the valley. But there are no clouds in the sky. It is the sound of 3,700 chariots beginning their charge. Muwatalli doesn't attack Ramesses directly. He is too smart for that. He sees the second Egyptian division, the division of Ra, marching casually toward the camp to join the pharaoh. They are in marching formation. Their shields are on their backs, their weapons are sheathed. They are completely exposed. Muwatalli gives the signal. You watch as the Hittite heavy chariots, those massive three-man tanks we saw being built, surge across the ford of the Orontes River. They don't just cross. They erupt from the water. They crash into the side of the Ra division like a freight train hitting a pedestrian. It isn't a battle, it's a liquidation. The Egyptian soldiers don't even have time to scream. The Hittite chariots smash through the column, cutting the Egyptian army in half. The Ra division evaporates in a mist of red. The survivors panic and flee north, running straight toward Ramesses's camp. Bringing the chaos with them, you are witnessing the opening moves of the Battle of Kadesh, and for the Hittites, it is going perfectly. They have achieved total strategic surprise. They have destroyed a quarter of the Egyptian army in minutes. Now, they are wheeling their heavy chariots around to finish the job. They are turning toward the camp where the great pharaoh is trapped, surrounded, and desperate. This is the moment Muwatalli has planned for. This is the moment the Hittite Empire exerts its dominance over the world. But warfare is chaotic. And while the Hittites have the heavy metal, Ramesses has something else. He has the desperate, cornered ferocity of a man who knows his legacy is about to end before it even begins. And, crucially, he has a very fast horse. You are standing in the middle of the Egyptian camp, and it is absolute bedlam. Imagine a peaceful Sunday picnic being interrupted by a monster truck rally, except the monster trucks are armed with spears and the drivers are screaming for blood. The survivors of the Ra division have just poured into the camp, eyes wide with terror, shouting that the Hittites are coming. Before the soldiers of the Amen division can even grab their shields, the wooden palisade wall explodes inward. The Hittite heavy chariots have arrived. This is where the design of that massive three-man vehicle proves its worth. In the open field, they are slow. But here, smashing through tents, supply wagons, and panicked infantry, they are unstoppable. They act like bulldozers. You watch as they plow through the Egyptian lines. The extra crew member, the shield bearer, protecting the driver from the desperate jabs of Egyptian spears. It is a massacre. The Egyptian camp, the mobile home of the pharaoh, is being overrun. In the center of this swirling dust cloud stands Ramesses, and this is the moment that will define his entire life. According to his own accounts which, to be fair, he plastered on every temple wall he could find, his army abandoned him. No officer was with me, no charioteer, he claims. My infantry and my chariotry melted away. He is effectively alone, surrounded by 2,500 enemy chariots. Now, historians still argue about how much of this is royal propaganda and how much is truth. Did he really fight off an entire army by himself? Probably not. That's the stuff of Marvel movies, not the Bronze Age, most likely. He was surrounded by his elite bodyguard, the shirten foreign mercenaries with horned helmets who were loyal only to him. But even with bodyguards, the situation is catastrophic. The king of Egypt is moments away from being captured or killed. If he dies here, the dynasty collapses. Ramesses jumps into his chariot. He calls out to his horses named Victory in Thebes, and Mut is contendent. He charges, but he doesn't charge away from the battle. He charges into it. He realizes that the Hittite chariots are crowding into the camp from the east. The only way out is to drive west, toward the river, hoping to punch a hole through the thinnest part of the Hittite line. But as Ramesses is fighting for his life, screaming prayers to the god Amen to save him, I call to you, my father, Amen. I am in the midst of multitudes who I do not know. The Hittite offensive suddenly stalls. Why? Why didn't they finish him off? They had the numbers, they had the momentum, the pharaoh was trapped. Here is the quirky human detail that saved the Egyptian empire. The Hittites got greedy. As the Hittite soldiers crashed into the royal camp, they saw something more interesting than a panicked pharaoh. They saw gold, they saw silver vessels, they saw chests of fine linen and jars of wine. You have to remember, these are soldiers who have marched for weeks. They are dusty, tired, and probably haven't been paid in a while. Suddenly, they are standing in the middle of the most opulent mobile palace on earth. Discipline breaks down. You watch as Hittite warriors jump out of their chariots not to fight, but to grab loot. They start fighting each other over golden cups. They stop killing Egyptians and start stuffing their tunics with valuables. The momentum of the charge evaporates. The killing machine turns into a mob of looters. This pause gives Ramesses the seconds he needs. He rallies his personal guard. He launches a counterattack against the distracted, looting Hittites. He starts carving a path through them. And then, a miracle happens. Just as Ramesses is about to be overwhelmed again, a new dust cloud appears on the horizon to the north. It's not the missing Egyptian divisions. Ptah and Seth are still miles away, useless. It is a force known as the Niran. These are elite troops from the coastal province of Amaru, arriving exactly at the right second, completely by accident or perhaps by divine timing. If you ask Ramesses, they haven't been caught in the ambush. They are fresh. They slam into the rear of the Hittite chariots, who are still busy arguing over who gets to keep the pharaoh's golden footstool. The tables turn instantly. The hunters become the hunted. The heavy Hittite chariots, caught flat-footed in the cluttered camp, can't maneuver. They are trapped between Ramesses charging from the center and the Niran hammering them from the outside. Panic spreads through the Hittite ranks. You watch as they try to turn their bulky wagons around. Wheels lock. Horses stumble over tent ropes. The retreat turns into a rout. The Hittite charioteers abandon their vehicles and run for the river. And this is where the tragedy of the heavy armor becomes apparent. The Orontes River is wide and deep here. The Hittites jump in, trying to swim back to the safety of Muwatalli's main army on the eastern bank. But they are wearing bronze-scale armor. They sink like stones. Ramesses, sensing blood, drives them into the water. His archers line the bank and use the swimming Hittites for target practice. The Egyptian reliefs of this battle are brutal. They depict the Hittite soldiers floating in the river, dragged down by the current. There is a famous detail in the carving that shows the Prince of Aleppo being pulled out of the water by his ankles, held upside down by his soldiers to drain the water out of his lungs. It's a moment of dark comedy amidst the slaughter, the humiliating near droning of a royal ally. On the far bank, Muwatalli watches the disaster unfold. He still has thousands of infantry reserves. He hasn't even committed his main foot soldiers yet. He could send them across the ford. He could swarm Ramesses and crush the Egyptian counterattack with sheer weight of numbers. But he doesn't. Why? Historians debate this furiously. Did he fear losing his infantry in the river crossing? Did he think the battle was already lost? Or was he simply stunned by the sudden reversal of fortune? He sends a few more chariot squadrons into the fray, but it's too little, too late. They are fed into the meat grinder. The sun begins to set over the carnage. The field is littered with smashed chariots, dead horses, and the bodies of the finest warriors of two empires. Ramesses has survived. He has pulled a tactical draw out of the jaws of a strategic defeat. He holds the field. But as the adrenaline fades and the night fires are lit, the reality sets in. Ramesses has saved his own life. Yes, he has inflicted heavy casualties on the Hittite chariot corps. But look up at the hill. Look at the city of Kadesh. The Hittite flag is still flying from the ramparts. Ramesses hasn't taken the city. He has lost a huge portion of his own army. The Ra division is basically gone. He is low on supplies. He is deep in enemy territory. He can't maintain a siege. The next morning, there is a brief skirmish, a little more sword rattling, but both sides are exhausted. They are like two heavyweight boxers in the 12th round, leaning on each other, too tired to throw a knockout punch. Muwatalli sends a messenger. He offers a truce. It's a face-saving gesture. He basically says, "Look, you've done well, Pharaoh. You survived, but you aren't taking Kadesh. Go home and we'll stop killing each other." Ramesses agrees. He turns his army around and marches back to Egypt. As soon as he gets home, he orders his stone carvers to get to work. He covers the walls of Karnak, Luxor, and Abu Simbel with massive depictions of his victory. He writes a poem, the poem of Pentor, that extols his personal bravery. He spins the story so hard that for 3,000 years, most people believed he actually won. But you know the truth. You stood in the camp. You saw the looting. You saw the stalemate. The Hittites kept Kadesh. They kept the territory. Strategically, Muwatalli won. He stopped the Egyptian invasion cold. However, the Battle of Kadesh did something more important than deciding who owned a specific fortress. It exhausted both empires. It proved that neither one could fully destroy the other. They had reached a state of mutually assured destruction. And when two superpowers realize they can't kill each other, they eventually have to do the unthinkable. They have to talk. We are about to fast forward 15 years. The blood has dried, Muwatalli is dead, a new king sits on the Hittite throne, and he is about to receive a silver tablet that will change the history of diplomacy forever. You are about to witness the signing of the Eternal Treaty. You are standing in the throne room of Pyrameses, the glittering new capital in the Nile Delta. It has been 15 years since the bloodbath at Kadesh. The screaming of dying horses and the crash of chariots have faded into memory, replaced by the scratching of scribes' pens. Ramesses II sits on his throne, but he isn't looking at a map of conquest today. He is looking at a delegation of men wearing heavy wool tunics that look far too hot for the Egyptian climate. They are Hittites, but they aren't carrying spears. They are carrying a heavy, gleaming slab of silver. You are about to witness the signing of the Treaty of Kadeshur, the Eternal Treaty which historians recognize as the first recorded peace treaty in human history where we possess the text from both sides. This is the moment the Bronze Age superpowers decided that fighting was simply too expensive. The tablet, the envoys present to Pharaoh, is a masterpiece of diplomatic art. It is solid silver, engraved with cuneiform script. It begins with a preamble that is surprisingly humble for two men who usually claim to be gods. Behold, Hattusa, the great king, king of Hatti, is in a treaty of brotherhood and peace with Usermater Setapenramesses, the great king, king of Egypt, forever. Note the name change. Muwatalli, the king who fought at Kadesh, is dead. The man signing this treaty is his brother Hattusa III. We'll get to how he got the job in a minute. Involves a lot of drama. Hattusa is a pragmatist. He looks at the world map and sees trouble brewing in the east. He needs to secure his southern flank. Ramesses, now middle-aged and realizing that he's never actually going to take Kadesh, comes to the same conclusion. So, they invent NATO. As the scribe reads the terms aloud, you realize this isn't just a ceasefire. It is a full-blown mutual defense pact. Clause 1, non-aggression. I won't attack you and you won't attack me. Simple enough, but Clause 2 is the game-changer. If an enemy from another land comes against the land of Hatti, and the king of Hatti sends to the king of Egypt, saying, "Come to my aid," then the king of Egypt shall send his infantry and his chariotry to kill the enemy. It works both ways. If Egypt gets attacked, the Hittites have to roll out. They are effectively saying, an attack on one is an attack on both. In a world where war was the default setting, this is revolutionary stabilizing logic. But there is a darker, more paranoid clause buried in the text that tells you what these kings were really afraid of. It's the extradition clause. If a nobleman flees from the land of Hatti and goes to the land of Egypt, the king of Egypt shall seize him and return him to the king of Hatti. This is the key. These kings weren't just afraid of foreign armies, they were terrified of their own families. They were afraid of usurpers, of rebellious princes running to the rival superpower to ask for an army. By agreeing to return political refugees, they were effectively closing the border to treason. They were agreeing to protect each other's thrones from internal coups. It's a dictator's insurance policy. Now, here's the quirky detail that you won't find in most political science textbooks. Who signed this treaty? Obviously, Ramesses and Hattusa put their names on it, but in the ancient world, a human signature is worthless. Humans lie, humans die. To make a treaty truly eternal, you need cosmic co-signers. The bottom of the silver tablet lists the witnesses, and it is a crowd. The sun god of the sky, the sun goddess of the earth, the storm god, the moon god. It goes on to list literally 1,000 deities, but then it gets weird. They invoke the landscape itself, the mountains, the rivers, the wells, the sea, the winds, and the clouds. They are making the environment itself a witness. The idea was that if you broke this oath, the very sky would turn against you. The river would drown you. The mountains would crush you. It was a total reality-binding contract. If you broke the peace, you were declaring war on nature. And it worked. This is the amazing part. Usually, these ancient treaties are broken before the clay is even dry. But the Treaty of Kadesh held for the next roughly 70 years until the very collapse of the Bronze Age. Egypt and Hatti never fought again. The trade routes opened up, the letters flowed, the brotherhood became real. Eventually, to seal the deal, Hattusa even sends his daughter to marry Ramesses. The Egyptian records describe the arrival of the Hittite princess in glowing terms, claiming that even the weather miraculously cleared up when she arrived. Ramesses, ever the romantic and collector of wives, was reportedly delighted with her. It was the Bronze Age equivalent of a royal wedding, cementing the alliance with blood. Today, the original silver tablets are long gone melted down for coin or loot centuries ago, but both sides kept copies. The Egyptians carved the text onto the walls of Karnak and the Ramesseum, which you can still visit today. The Hittites kept clay tablets in their archives, which is what we found at Hattusa. And here is the mainstream fact that connects this dusty history to your modern life. If you walk into the United Nations headquarters in New York City, right outside the Security Council chamber, you will see a replica of this treaty on the wall. It hangs there as a symbol of the enduring hope that even the bitterest enemies men who tried to drown each other in the Orontes River can eventually find a way to share the world. However, historians still argue about the translation nuances. The Egyptian version makes it sound like the Hittites came begging for peace because they were starving. The Hittite version makes it sound like a meeting of equals. It's a classic case of spin. Even in peace, the propaganda war never really stopped. But why did they do it? Why did these two roosters suddenly decide to share the henhouse? You walk out of the throne room, leaving the silver tablet behind, and look east. The sky there is darkening. The reason for the peace wasn't altruism, it was fear. There was a new player on the board, a kingdom that had been a minor nuisance for centuries but was now waking up with a terrifying hunger: Assyria. The Assyrians were dismantling the buffer state of Mitanni. They were marching toward the Euphrates. They were a military machine that made the Hittites and Egyptians look like gentlemen. They flayed their enemies. They piled heads into pyramids. They were the storm rising in the east, and both Ramesses and Hattusa knew that if they didn't watch each other's backs, the Assyrians would come for them both. But while the international borders were secure, the Hittite royal family was about to do what it did best: implode. You see, the man who signed that treaty, Hattusa III, wasn't the rightful king. He was the younger brother. He had stolen the throne from his nephew, and while the peace with Egypt was holding, the ghosts of that usurpation were starting to rattle the chains in the palace. You are about to witness the internal rot that began to weaken the Hittite spine just as the world was preparing to end. The Eternal Treaty bought them time, but it couldn't buy them unity. The dynasty was fracturing, and the great king was looking over his shoulder, waiting for the knife he knew was coming. You are standing on the ramparts of a Hittite border fortress, overlooking the Euphrates River. To your back is the safety of the Hittite heartland. To your left is the road to Egypt, now open and peaceful thanks to the Silver Treaty. But you aren't looking left. You are looking straight across the river into the haze of the eastern horizon. And you are nervous. For centuries, looking east meant looking at the Mitanni arrival, sure, but a known quantity. They played by the rules, they married your daughters. They fought honorable chariot duels, but the Mitanni are gone. They have been eaten alive by a new power that is rising like a black tide from northern Iraq, Syria. If the Hittites are the disciplined soldiers of the ancient world, and the Egyptians are the glamorous superstars, the Assyrians are the psychopaths. Under their king Shalmani-Zurai, they have shattered the remnants of the Mitanni state, turning it into a province called Hanigalbat. They don't just defeat armies, they blind prisoners. They deport entire populations. They employ psychological terror as state policy. You watch the smoke rising from the far bank. The buffer zone is gone. The Hittite Empire now shares a direct border with a militarized Assyrian state that is hungry for resources. The Eternal Treaty with Egypt wasn't an act of brotherly love. It was a frantic attempt by Hattusa III to clear his schedule so he could focus on this nightmare in the east. But while the storm gathers on the horizon, the real danger is actually standing right behind you inside the palace walls. Hattusa III, the man who signed the peace deal, is a usurper. We mentioned this briefly, but now we need to dig into the dirty laundry. Hattusa stole the throne from his nephew, a young man named Yerhaichebe, throne name Mersili III. It wasn't a clean transition, it was a civil war. Hattusa used his connections, his military command, and arguably his charisma to bully the young king out of power. Yerhaichebe didn't go quietly. He was exiled, but like a bad penny, he kept turning up. He fled to Babylon. Then, in a move that must have made Hattusa sweat through his royal robes, he fled to Egypt. Imagine the awkwardness. Hattusa has just signed a treaty with Ramesses that includes an extradition clause. If a fugitive comes to you, send him back. And now, the previous legitimate king of Hatti is sitting in Ramesses' court, probably drinking the pharaoh's wine and saying, "You know, my uncle is a traitor." Ramesses, being a master politician, played both sides. He didn't hand Hittites back immediately, which caused a massive diplomatic incident. The letters from this period are tense. Hattusa writes, "Send him back," Ramesses replies. "Who? I haven't seen him. Maybe he's in the Delta. I'll have a look." It was a game of cat and mouse that tested the new alliance to its breaking point. But the usurpation did more than just create a refugee crisis. It cracked the foundation of the empire. To secure his stolen throne, Hattusa had to make deals. He had to bribe the nobility to accept him, and the biggest bribe of all involved the city of Hattusa. Remember Hattusa, the city Muwatalli moved the capital to Tatsu. When the capital moved back to Hattusa, Hattusa didn't just become a ghost town, it became a power base for another branch of the royal families, specifically a man named Kurenta. Kurenta was another son of Muwatalli. Technically, he had a better claim to the throne than Hattusa. To keep Kurenta quiet, Hattusa gave him Hattusa and made it a kingdom within a kingdom. He gave Kurenta special privileges. He didn't have to pay taxes. He didn't have to send troops to the main army. You are witnessing the feudalization of the empire. By trying to buy loyalty, Hattusa is slicing up the state. There are now effectively two Hittite empires, the main one in Hattusa and a shadow empire in the south run by Kurenta. Historians still argue about whether Kurenta eventually declared independence or even briefly seized the main throne in a coup a few years later. There are seals found in Hattusa with Kurenta's name and the title Great King, suggesting he might have made a play for the top spot. So, you have a situation where the United States of Hatti is looking a lot like the Confederate States of Hatti. The manpower is divided. The loyalties are split. If a massive crisis were to hit, say, a famine or an invasion the empire might decide it's not their problem. And, as if the political fragmentation wasn't enough, the gods seem to be turning away again. The climate is shifting. We have Triering data from central Anatolia that shows a series of severe droughts hitting right around this time. The grain is failing. The Hittite kings are sending desperate letters to Egypt and Ugarit, asking for shipments of grain to keep the land of Hatti alive. The superpower is becoming a welfare state, dependent on foreign aid to feed its people. You walk through the palace corridors, and you can feel the anxiety. The scribes are overworked. The king is old and sick. The queen, Puduapa, fascinating figure, who is effectively running the government, is writing frantic prayers to the sun goddess. Make the king well, save the land. There is a fringe theory that Puduapa, who was originally a priestess from Kitsuatna, introduced so many foreign Hurrian elements into the state religion during this time that she alienated the traditional Hittite nobility. Did a culture war exacerbate the political divide? It's possible. When the ship is sinking, the crew starts arguing about who changed the radio station. As you look at the map in your mind, you see the cracks spreading. The Assyrians are pushing from the east. The Casca are stirring in the north. The western vassals are getting restless. And in the center, the royal family is locked in a multi-generational feud over who gets to wear the big hat. The Hittite Empire looks strong on the outside. The walls of Hattusa are still huge. The reputation of the army is still intact, but it is a hollow shell. It has been hollowed out by civil war, by plague, by economic dependency, and by the simple exhaustion of trying to run a world empire from a rocky plateau with bad weather. And now, far to the west, beyond the horizon of the Aegean Sea, something is happening that no treaty can stop. The dominoes are starting to fall. A disruption is rippling through the Mediterranean trade network. Cities are burning in Greece. Palaces are being abandoned. A wave of desperate, hungry people is taking to the sea. You are about to witness the end of the world. Not just the Hittite world, but the entire interconnected Bronze Age system. The sea peoples are coming, and the divided, hungry, paranoid land of Hatti is in no shape to stop them. You are standing on the bustling docks of Ugarit, a wealthy port city on the coast of modern-day Syria. For centuries, this has been the beating heart of the global economy. It is the Singapore of the Bronze Age. You usually see ships here from everywhere, heavy merchant vessels from Egypt, carrying grain and papyrus, Mycenaean galleys from Greece, loaded with perfumed oil and painted pottery, and Cypriot ships, The air usually smells of spices, cedar, and the salty tank of prosperity. But today, the docks are quiet. There are no ships on the horizon. The warehouses are half empty. The merchants aren't haggling, they are whispering. You are feeling the first tremors of what historians call the Bronze Age collapse. And it is terrifying precisely because nobody understands why it's happening. We tend to think of the collapse of civilization as a sudden Hollywood-style Ivantan asteroid hits, aliens invade, or zombies attack. But the reality you are witnessing is much slower and much scarier. It is a systems collapse. Think of the late Bronze Age as a complex machine, like a modern car engine. It runs beautifully as long as every part is working. The Hittites provide the iron and silver. The Egyptians provide the gold and grain. The Cypriots provide the copper. The Afghans, via a long chain of middlemen, provide the tin. And the Mycenaeans provide the shipping. It is a fully globalized economy, but this interdependence is also its weakness. If you pull one wire, the whole engine stalls. And right now, someone has pulled the tin wire. This is a quirky economic detail that explains the panic. Bronze is the material that this entire age is named after, is an alloy. It's 90% copper and 10% tin. Copper is relatively easy to find. Cyprus is basically made of it. But tin is the oil of the ancient world. It is rare. It has to be imported from thousands of miles away, possibly as far as Afghanistan or even Cornwall in Britain. As you stand on the dock, you realize the tin has stopped arriving. The trade routes in the east have been cut by the Assyrian wars. The trade routes in the west are being disrupted by piracy. Without tin, you can't make bronze. Without bronze, you can't make plowshares to farm or swords to defend yourself. The military-industrial complex is grinding to a halt. Imagine if the modern world suddenly ran out of silicon chips. That is the level of crisis we are talking about. But the economy isn't the only thing failing. The planet itself seems to be turning against humanity. You look up at the sky. It's blue, cloudless, and mocking. It hasn't rained significantly in years. We have pollen data from sediment cores in the Mediterranean that confirm a massive decadus-long megadrought hit the region around 1200 BC. The breadbaskets of the world are turning into dust bowls. The Hittite king is writing desperate letters to the pharaoh. "I have no grain in my lands," he pleads. "It is a matter of life and death." In Ugarit, the king writes to a neighbor, "There is famine in your house. We will all die of hunger." This isn't just a bad harvest, it's a climate shift. The complex bureaucracy of the Hittite state, with its tax collectors and temple rations, can't handle a crisis this deep. You can't tax a farmer who has nothing to give. You can't feed a standing army with clay tablets. Historians still argue whether there was another geological factor at play, an earthquake storm. This sounds like a bad disaster movie premise, but there is real science behind it. Tectonic plates can slip in a sequence, triggering a cascade of earthquakes over a period of years. Archaeologists have found evidence of earthquake damage in Mycenae, Troy, Hattusa, and Ugarit, all dating to roughly the same 50-year window. Walls toppled, people were crushed. Imagine the psychological impact. You were hungry because of the drought. You were broke because the trade stopped. And now, the earth is shaking the walls of your city down. It must have felt like the gods had declared war on civilization itself. The psychological glue that held these societies together, the belief that the king could intercede with the gods to ensure order's dissolving. If the king can't stop the earth from shaking or the rain from falling, why are we paying him taxes? The result is a domino effect of chaos. You hear rumors from the west. The great palaces of Grismacene, Pylos, Tiranzar burning, the Mycenaean civilization, the guys who fought the Trojan War, is collapsing into anarchy. Their refugees are fleeing. They are getting into boats. They are hungry, they are armed, and they are desperate. They are becoming the Sea Peoples. This term gets thrown around a lot, often conjuring images of a unified Viking-like invasion force. But standing here on the dock, you realize the truth is sadder and more chaotic. These aren't an organized army with a flag and a general. They are a migration of climate refugees. They are displaced people from the Aegean, from Italy, from the islands. They have lost their homes to famine and war, so they are coming to take yours. The Hittites are watching this wave approach with growing dread. They have the strongest land army in the world. They can crush the Assyrians in a chariot duel. They can hold the line against Egypt, but they have no navy. They are a landlocked power sitting on a plateau. They don't know how to fight an enemy that comes from the surf, strikes a coastal city, burns the warehouses, and vanishes before the chariots can even be hitched. You leave the docks of Ugarit as the sun sets. The mood is apocalyptic. The king of Ugarit has sent his entire army to help the Hittites in the north and his entire fleet to the coast of Lycia. The city is defenseless. A letter found in the ruins of Ugarit captures this final moment perfectly. The king writes, "My father, behold, the enemy's ships came. My cities were burned, and they did evil things in my country. Does not my father know that all my troops and chariots are in the land of Hatti, and all my ships are in the land of Lucca? Thus the country is abandoned to itself. The letter was never sent. It was found in the kiln, waiting to be fired when the city was sacked. The lights of the Bronze Age are going out one by one. The trade networks are severed. The grain is gone. The earth is shaking. And now, on the horizon, the sails of the sea peoples are visible. The Hittite Empire, already fractured by civil war and weakened by plague, is about to face the ultimate stress test. The walls of Hattusa were built to stop armies. They were not built to stop a migration of starving people who have nothing left to lose. You are standing on the white, sandy beaches of Alashiwat, we now call Cyprus. The Mediterranean sun is beating down, turning the turquoise water into a dazzling sheet of glass. Under normal circumstances, this would be paradise. You can smell the wild oregano from the hills and the salt spray from the surf. But today, the horizon is stained with black smoke. For the Hittites, this island isn't a vacation spot. It is a lifeline. Elasia is the copper mountain. It is the source of the metal that keeps the Bronze Age running. For centuries, the Hittite kings have claimed authority over this island, taxing its mines and using its ports. But now, the king of Elasia is sending frantic letters to the mainland that sound less like diplomatic correspondence and more like the final log entry of a doomed starship captain. "My father," he writes, "behold, the enemy's ships came here. My cities were burned, and they did evil things in my country." You look out to sea, shielding your eyes against the glare. You see them coming. They don't look like the disciplined galley fleets of the Egyptians or the heavy merchant convoys of the Mycenaeans. It's a swarm. There are hundreds of ships, some large transport vessels, others small, fast-raiding skiffs. They are filled with men, yes, but also women and children. You see ox carts loaded onto the decks. You see livestock. This isn't a raiding party, it's a migration. It's a floating nation of the desperate, moving across the sea like a plague of locusts, consuming everything in its path. These are the sea peoples. Historians have spent the last century arguing furiously about who exactly these people were. Were they Vikings of the south? Were they Mycenaean Greeks fleeing their own collapsed palaces? Were they Italians, Sicilians? The Egyptian reliefs give them names that sound maddeningly familiar, yet distinct. The Shurdan, the Shekelesh, the Peleset, the Jakar. As the lead ships crash onto the beach, you get a good look at them. They look terrifying. The Shurdan warriors are wearing horned helmets, not the fake Viking kind, but helmets with actual bull horns sticking out the sides. They carry round shields and strange heavy swords. The Pelesetu, most scholars agree, are the biblical Philistines wear, distinct feathered headdresses that look like stiff mohawks. They are a motley crew of different tribes and languages, united only by hunger and the momentum of destruction. Now, here is the mainstream fact that usually gets lost in the chaos. The Hittites didn't just sit back and wait to die. They actually tried to fight them at sea. This is a huge deal. The Hittites were landlubbers. They were mountain people who liked chariots and solid ground. They hated the water. They didn't really have a navy. They relied on their vassals like Ugarit to do the sailing. But the last Hittite king, Suppiluliuma II, named after his famous grandfather, realized that if he waited for the enemy to land, it would be too late. He commandeered the ships of Elasia. He put Hittite heavy infantry onto the decksmen, who were probably vomiting from seasickness. He sailed out to meet the swarm. You are witnessing the only recorded naval battle in Hittite history. Suppiluliuma II claims a victory. In a hieroglyphic inscription found in the upper city of Hattusa, he boasts, "The ships of Elasia met me in the sea 3 times. I destroyed them. I seized the ships and set them on fire in the sea." It sounds impressive. He punched the nose of the invasion force. But standing here on the beach, watching the aftermath, you realize that winning a battle against a migration is like trying to hold back the tide with a bucket. You can sink 10 ships, maybe 20. But there are hundreds more behind them. And for every warrior you kill, there are 3 more hungry fathers willing to pick up his sword to feed their families. And speaking of swords, you notice something different about the weapons these invaders are carrying. The Hittite soldiers are armed with their traditional sickle swords, or trusting daggers, weapons designed for the structured, dew-like combat of the late Bronze Age. The Sea Peoples are carrying something new. It's called the Naui II type sword. This is a quirky technological detail that changed the world. The Naui II is a long, straight, slashing sword. It's cast in a single piece with the handle, meaning it won't snap at the hilt when you swing it hard. It is a butcher's tool. It is designed for chaotic close-quarters hacking. In a tight formation or a confused beach landing, the elegant fencing of the Bronze Age elite does unstand a chance against a guy swinging a Naui to like a weed whacker. It's the AK-47 of the 12th century BC, each PCI durable and brutally effective. You watch as the Sea Peoples overwhelm the Hittite defenders on the beach. It's not a battle, it's a riot. The invaders don't stop to occupy the forts. They burn them. They strip the copper warehouses. They kill the cattle. And then they keep moving. They aren't here to rule Alasia. They are here to eat it and move on. The fall of Cyprus is the death knell for the Hittite economy. The copper supply is cut. The trade routes are severed. The island that acted as a forward operating base is now an enemy launchpad. Suppiluliuma retreats to the mainland. He has won his naval skirmish, but he has lost the war. He knows that the swarm isn't stopping. They are heading for the Cilician coast. They are heading for the port of Ugarit. They are heading for the soft underbelly of the Hittite Empire. As the smoke from the burning Cypriot cities rises into the sky, creating a dark smudge against the setting sun, you realize that the system's collapse has reached the point of no return. The complexity of the Hittite state, the scribes, the taxes, the treaties is useless against this. You can't sign a treaty with a famine. You can't intimidate a refugee with a chariot if he has nowhere else to go. The eternal treaty with Egypt is now worthless because the Egyptians are busy fighting for their own lives on the Nile Delta. The Assyrians are hunkering down in the east. The Hittites are alone. You catch a ride on one of the last fleeing merchant ships heading north, toward the coast of Turkey. You are racing the apocalypse to the capital. But as you look back at the sea, you know that the enemy isn't just behind you. They are all around you. The Casca in the north have smelled blood. The Phrygians in the west are moving. The noose is tightening around Hattusa. The great king is back in his mountain fortress, probably offering frantic sacrifices to the storm god, begging for a miracle. But the storm god isn't answering. The only storm coming is the one carrying the Naui II swords. You step off the boat on the mainland and begin the long trek up to the plateau. The roads are clogged with refugees, the fields are unharvested, the air feels heavy with finality. You are heading back to where we started, to the Lion Gate. But the lions don't look so intimidating anymore. They look like they are guarding a tomb. You are standing back at the Lion Gate, where our journey began. But the lions aren't roaring at the sunrise anymore. They are staring blankly into a city that feels like a ghost town. The wind whistles through the massive archway, but it doesn't carry the sounds of hammers, or chanting priests, or the clatter of chariot wheels. It carries silence, a deep, unnatural silence. You walk into the upper city. The streets are empty. The doors to the houses are open, swinging creakily on their hinges. You peek inside a workshop. The tools are gone. You look into a granary. It has been swept clean. You walk up to the royal palace on the citadel of Bikakal. The guards are missing. The throne room is bare. This brings us to the most haunting realization about the fall of the Hittite Empire. The capital was untaken by storm. There was no battle of Hattusa. There were no bodies piled high in the gates, no desperate last stand by the king's bodyguard. The city was abandoned. Archaeological evidence from the final destruction layer tells a fascinating story. We do unfind the skeletons of massacred civilians like we do at Troy or destruction layers in Canaan. We don't find hoards of gold or silver that were dropped in a panic. We find ... nothing. The cupboards were bare. The archives were largely emptied of the most recent sensitive treaties. Suppiluliuma II, the last great king, saw the writing on the wall. He saw the Sea Peoples burning the coast. He saw the Casca coming down from the mountains. He saw the grain shipments failing, and he made the cold, hard calculation that Hattuseth This massive stone fortress that had stood for 400 years was a trap. You can't eat stone walls. You can't fight a famine with fortifications. So he packed his bags. The royal court, the elite guard, the high priests, and the treasury simply left. They organized a massive evacuation, taking everything of value and marching out, presumably heading south or perhaps into the impregnable rock sanctuaries. They left the common people behind to fend for themselves, or perhaps the city had already depopulated due to the famine. You are standing in the wreckage of a failed state. The brain of the empire decided to detach itself from the dying body. But the city didn't stay empty for long. As you stand in the courtyard of the great temple, you hear the sound of approaching voices. But they aren't speaking Nesili. They are speaking a rougher dialect, or perhaps a completely different language like Phrygian or Kaskin. These are the scavengers. They are the starving farmers from the countryside, the mountain tribes who have watched this city with envy for centuries, or perhaps the vanguard of the sea peoples who finally hiked inland. They enter the city expecting loot. They expect to find the gold of Babylon and the silver of Egypt. Instead, they find empty rooms. They find dust. Their disappointment turns into rage, and rage in the ancient world usually manifests as fire. You watch as the first torch is thrown. It lands in the dry timbers of the temple roof. The cedar wood, imported at great cost from Lebanon, catches instantly. The fire spreads. It jumps from the temple to the administrative buildings. It climbs the hill to the citadel. The burning of Hattusa was an event of geological intensity. The excavations reveal that the fire was so hot and burned for so long that it didn't just turn the mud brick to ash, it vitrified the stone. That means the heat was intense enough to melt the silica in the rock and turn it into glass. The limestone blocks of the public buildings cracked and exploded. The mud bricks were baked into red ceramic, hard as concrete. This wasn't a tactical fire. It was an erasure. It was an attempt to wipe the memory of the Hittite state off the face of the earth. Who struck the match? Historians still argue. Some say it was the Casca, the sworn enemies who finally got their revenge. Some say it was the Phrygians, a new group moving in from the Balkans, who would later give us King Midas. But there is a darker theory. It was an inside job. Perhaps the fire was started by the Hittite subjects themselves. Imagine the anger of a population that has been taxed into starvation to build these massive walls, only to see the king abandon them when the food ran out, burning the tax records, burning the palace, burning the temples of the gods who failed to bring rain. It would be a final act of defiance by a people betrayed by their elite. As the flames roar around you, turning the night sky a bruised purple, you realize the tragedy of the Hittites. They were the masters of diplomacy. They invented international law. They valued order above everything else. And their end was absolute chaos. The land of Hatti didn't fall because of one lost battle. It fell because the complex system they built, the trade, the treaties, the bureaucracy was too fragile to survive a changing world. You walk back toward the Lion Gate, the heat of the burning city pressing against your back. The lions are illuminated by the flickering orange light. They look terrified now. The shadows dance across their stone faces, making them seem alive. They are watching the only world they have ever known turn to ash. The king is gone, the scribes are gone, the gods have fled. And as the roof of the great temple collapses with a sound like a thunderclap, the silence returns. But this time, it's not the silence of anticipation. It is the silence of the grave. The Hittite Empire is dead. But the story isn't quite over, because even though the head was cut off, the body kept twitching. The king might have fled, but the people were still here. The Casca were still here. And in the mountains of the north, the old enemies of Hatti were about to have the last laugh, only to realize that without the Hittites, they were just guys living on a rocky hill with nobody to raid. You turn your back on the smoking ruins of Hattusa and look toward the horizon that the Hittite kings spent for centuries obsessing over. The north, specifically, the rugged, mist-shrouded peaks of the Pontic Mountains that separate the central plateau from the Black Sea. If Hattusa was the orderly, bureaucratic brain of the empire, those mountains were its migraine. You are looking at the home of the Casca. Throughout our journey tonight, we've mentioned them in passing the annoying neighbors, the raiders. But to relegate the Casca to a footnote is to miss the central tragedy of Hittite geopolitics. These weren't just a nuisance, they were the anti-Hittites. They were the chaos to the Hittite order. And as you stand here, watching the embers of the capital die out, you realize that in the long game of survival, the guys living in tents ultimately beat the guys living in palaces. To understand the Casca, you have to throw out your civilization game rulebook. The Hittites played by the rules. They built cities, they wrote down laws, they had a king, they taxed grain. The Casca did none of that. They were a loose confederation of semi-nomadic tribes who raised pigs and wove linen. They had no capital city to burn. They had no central king to sign a treaty with. They didn't leave behind a single written document. The only reason we know they existed is because the Hittites never shut up about them. Imagine trying to fight a war against smoke. That was the Casca problem. Every spring, when the snows melted, the Casca warriors would sweep down from the highlands. They wouldn't march in formation. They would strike a village, steal the cattle, burn the crops, and capture the people for slaves. When the heavy Hittite chariots finally rumbled up from the capital to crush them, the Casca would simply dissolve back into the mountains. They knew the Hittite chariots couldn't follow them up the steep, rocky goat paths. They would just wait up there, eating the Hittites' cows and laughing until the army had to go home for the harvest. It was a forever war. The Hittites tried everything. They tried genocide, they tried diplomacy, they tried bribery. There is a hilarious and desperate prayer from King Arnawanda, where he basically tries to guilt-trip the gods about the Casca. He writes, "The Casca have taken your temples. They are grazing their sheep in your holy sanctuaries. They are drinking from your gold cups. Do something." The gods, apparently, were indifferent to zoning violations. But here is the quirky detail that adds a layer of complexity to this barbarian narrative. The Casca were unjust enemies. They were sometimes employees. In the periods between the raiding and the burning, the Casca would actually come down to the Hittite cities and work. They served as mercenaries in the Hittite army. There were even Casca contingents fighting for the Hittites at the Battle of Kadesh against the Egyptians. It was a toxic, codependent relationship. The Hittites needed the Casca for manpower and probably cheap wool, and the Casca needed the Hittites for grain and luxury goods. They were like the unruly cousins who show up to the family reunion, drink all the beer, punch the host, but then help fix the car before they leave. However, the Casca had a long memory. They never forgot that the Hittites claimed ownership of their mountains, and they never missed an opportunity to kick the empire when it was down. In fact, a century before the final collapse, the Casca had actually managed to sack Hattusa the first time. It was during the reign of Tudhaliya III, the state nearly collapsed then, only to be saved by Suppiluliuma. But this time, there is no Suppiluliuma. As the Hittite administration crumbled under the weight of famine and the sea peoples, the Casca surely sensed the weakness. You can imagine the scouts on the mountain ridges watching the Hittite patrols disappear. They would have seen the watchtowers go unmanned. They would have smelled the smoke of the burning ports. Historians still argue about the exact role the Casca played in the final destruction. Did they coordinate with the sea peoples? It's unlikely. They probably didn't even know each other existed. Did the Phrygians from the west pay them to attack? Possibly, or most likely, did they just do what they had always done? But this time, nobody stopped them. It's easy to picture the final days, the Casca swarming over the undefended walls of the upper city, expecting a fight, only to find the gates open. They would have poured into the temples they had envied for generations. They would have smashed the clay tablets they couldn't read, unknowingly destroying the history of their only rival. They would have taken the bronze statues to melt down for weapons. But here is the irony. When the Casca burned Hattusa, they effectively fired their best customer. With the Hittite state gone, the trade networks collapsed. There were no more caravans to raid. There were no more grain silos to plunder. The symbiotic loop was broken. The Casca didn't move into the palaces. They didn't put on the robes of the great king and start issuing decrees. That wasn't their style. They looted what they could carry, and then ... they went home. They went back to their pigs and their mountains. They vanished from history almost as completely as the Hittites did. Without the Hittite scribes to record their raids, the Casca fade into the darkness of the Iron Age. You stand in the ashes of the capital, and you realize that the Casca were the ultimate survivors, but they were not builders. They were the entropy that eats at the edges of civilization. They proved that you don't need a complex bureaucracy or a professional army to win. Sometimes, you just need to be stubborn, mobile, and willing to wait for the other guy to starve. But while the Casca went back to the hills and the central Hittite state died, the culture didn't vanish completely. Not everyone fled to the mountains. Some of the Hittite elite, the ones who escaped the collapse or were already living in the southern provinces, managed to hold on. They retreated to the southeast, to the lands near modern Syria and the Turkish border. They looked at the chaos of the Dark Age and decided that if they couldn't be the great kingdom anymore, they would be a bunch of little kingdoms. They kept the names, they kept the gods, they even kept the writing script. You are about to meet the Neo-Hittites. They are the survivors who crawled out of the wreckage of the Bronze Age, dusted themselves off, and said, "Okay, we're smaller now, but we're still here." And in a strange twist of fate, it is through them and their interactions with the Bible that the name Hittite was preserved for 3,000 years, waiting for us to dig it up. You are walking away from the smoldering ruins of the Central Plateau, heading south toward the border of modern-day Turkey and Syria. You leave the ghosts of Hattusa behind and descend into the fertile plains of the Euphrates. And here, something strange happens. You expect to find more ruin, more silence. Instead, you hear noise, you hear markets, you see chariots, not the rusty, broken ones of the collapse, but shiny new ones. You see kings sitting on thrones, calling themselves Great King and sealing documents with a double-headed eagle. Welcome to the Neo-Hittite states, or as I like to call them, the Hittite Afterparty. When the central brain of the empire died in Hattusa, the body didn't just instantly rot. The southern provinces, specifically the viceregal kingdom of Carchemish, survived the Sea People's onslaught. In fact, they didn't just survive, they thrived. Khusateshub, the viceroy of Carchemish and a direct descendant of the royal line, looked north, saw that the boss was gone, and decided to give himself a promotion. He adopted the title Great King. He kept the bureaucracy running. He kept the flame alive. You are walking through the streets of Carchemish now. It's a bustling, wealthy city. But if you look closely, you'll notice the vibe is different. It's a remix. The art style is a blend of Hittite stiffness and Assyrian detail. The gods are still there to Hunza. The storm god is still smashing things. With his club butt, he looks a bit more Aramaic now. The culture has hybridized. This brings us to a major linguistic shift that explains why history got so confused. In Hattusa, the elite scribes wrote in Neseli using cuneiform on clay tablets. That was the official language. But the common people, the traders, the soldiers, they mostly spoke Luwian. And they didn't write with wedges. They wrote with pictures. You look at a massive stone slabin, orthos tatlining the city gate. It isn't covered in the abstract chicken scratch of cuneiform. It is covered in Luwian hieroglyphs. Getty images, these are bold, cartoon-like symbols. A foot, a head, a donkey, a jar. When the empire collapsed, the elite cuneiform died with the scribes in the burning citadel. But the people's script, the Luwian hieroglyphs, survived on the stone monuments of these survivor states. For the next 500 years, this will be the voice of the Hittites. Now, here is the mainstream historical fact that solves a riddle you might have encountered in Sunday school. If you read the Bible, you see Hittites mentioned all over the place. Abraham buys a burial plot from Ephron the Hittite. King David has a loyal general named Uriah the Hittite before he famously steals Uriah's wife, Bathsheba. King Solomon sells chariots to the kings of the Hittites. For centuries, historians were baffled. They looked at the timeline and said, wait, David and Solomon lived around 1000 BC. The Hittite Empire collapsed in 1200 BCE. The Bible must be wrong. But you, standing here in the streets of Carchemish, know the truth. The Bible isn't talking about the great empire of Hattusa. The Hebrew scribes didn't know about Supalul-Yamah or the Treaty of Kadesh. When they said Hittites, they were talking about these Geista Neo-Hittite city-states of Syria like Carchemish, Hamath, and Malatia. These were the neighbors of ancient Israel. They were the Hittites of the Iron Age, smaller, scrappier, but still formidable enough to sell high-end military hardware to Solomon. Historians still argue about what to call them. Some purists hate the term Neo-Hittite and prefer Syro-Anatolian or Luwian-Aramean, arguing that they had evolved so much they were a distinct culture. It's the ship of Theseus debate. If you change the language, the location, and the government, are they still Hittites? Considering their kings were still naming themselves Supalul-Yamah and Lubarna to chase the glory days. They certainly thought so. But there is a quirky fringe theory that adds a fascinating twist to this survival story. Recent excavations in the plain of Amuk, southern Turkey, have uncovered a kingdom called Palestine. Not Palestine, Some archaeologists believe this was a state founded by the Sea Peoples, specifically the Peleset, Philistines, who settled down, stopped raiding, and mixed with the local Hittite population. Imagine that, the refugees who destroyed the empire eventually settled down and married the survivors, creating a hybrid Philistine-Hittite kingdom. It's a historical mashup that feels like fan fiction, but the inscriptions are there. However, the Neo-Hittite party couldn't last forever. The neighborhood was getting dangerous again, while the city-states were busy bickering with each other and selling horses to Israel. The old monster in the east was waking up. Assyria, the Assyrians, had suffered their own decline during the Bronze Age collapse, but by the 9th and 8th centuries BCE, they were back, and they were angrier than ever. This was the Neo-Assyrian Empire, the first true military superpower of the Iron Age. They looked west at the wealthy, fragmented Neo-Hittite cities and saw an Aleukaniat buffet. You watch as the shadow falls over Carchemish. It happens in slow motion. First, the Assyrians demand tribute. The Neo-Hittite kings pay up, sending gold, silver, and dyed wool to Nineveh to keep the wolf at the door. But the demands get higher. The Assyrian kingsmen with terrifying names like Tiglath-Pileser III and Sargon too don't want friends, they want subjects. The end comes in 717 BCE. Sargon II, the king of Assyria, decides he is tired of the independent attitude of Pasiri, the last king of Carchemish. He accuses Pasiri of conspiring with the Phrygians. It's probably true, but it doesn't matter. It's a pretext. You stand on the walls of Carchemish one last time. You see the Assyrian siege engine's massive iron-wheeled towers rolling toward the gates. You see the Assyrian archers disciplined and ruthless. This isn't the chaotic swarm of the Sea Peoples. This is the death of 1,000 cuts, delivered with surgical precision. Carchemish falls. But Sargon doesn't just burn it, he erases it. He deports the population. This was the Assyrian way. They would pick up entire cities and move them to the other side of the empire to break their spirit. The Neo-Hittite elite, the scribes who knew the hieroglyphs, the artisans who carved the lions, they are marched off to Iraq. They vanish into the melting pot of the Assyrian state. The Hittite name is extinguished. The language Luwian is gradually replaced by Aramaic. The distinct culture that began on the rocky plateau of Anatolia 2,000 years earlier is finally, truly dead. The lions of Carchemish are buried under the sand. The gods are forgotten. For the next 2,500 years, the world suffers a collective amnesia. The Greeks forgot them. The Romans never knew them. The only memory of them that remained was that handful of confused verses in the Bible about Uriah and some guys who sold cedar wood. The land of Hatti became a myth, a shadow. Travelers would walk past the massive ruins in Turkey, look at the strange pictures on the rocks, and shrug. Maybe the Egyptians built this. They would say, maybe it's magic. You are standing in the silence of the ages now. The wind blows over the mounds of earth that cover the palaces. The sheep graze on top of the libraries. It seems like the story is over, but history has a way of refusing to stay buried. We are going to jump forward in time. We are going to skip the Romans, the Byzantines, the Ottomans. We are going to land in the late 19th century in a world of steam trains, pith helmets, and very stubborn academics. You are about to witness one of the greatest detective stories in the history of archaeology. You are about to see the moment when the ghost finally spoke. You are fast-forwarding through time now, the centuries blurring past like the view from a speeding train window. The Iron Age bleeds into the Classical Age. The Romans marched through paving roads over the Hittite foundations without ever knowing who built them. The Byzantines come, building churches. The Seljuks and Ottomans arrive, establishing villages in the valleys. The name Hatti is erased from the map, replaced by the Turkish name for the local village, Bogaskale. By the late 19th century, you are standing in a world of steam engines, telegraphs, and men in pith helmets who think they know everything about ancient history. To them, the history of the Near East is a duet between Egypt and Babylon, with the Assyrians playing the drums in the background. If you asked a Victorian scholar about the Hittites, they would shrug and quote the Bible. Oh yes, a small Canaanite tribe. Abraham bought a cave from them. Nice fellows, but insignificant. But the landscape refused to keep the secret. Travelers passing through central Turkey kept seeing things that didn't fit the narrative. They saw massive stone blocks. They saw the Lion Gate peeking out of the dirt. They saw rock reliefs of gods standing on mountains. And most maddeningly, they saw a writing script that looked like hieroglyphs but definitely wasn't Egyptian. They called them Hamath stones. They guessed the ruins were Tyria, or maybe a lost Median city. Nobody guessed it was a lost superpower. Enter Hugo Winkler. Winkler isn't your dashing, whip-cracking archaeologist. He is a grumpy, prickly German Assyriologist who hated fieldwork. He hated the heat, he hated the bugs, and he hated the food. But in 1906, convinced that this site at Bogascale was important, he started digging. You are standing next to him on the slope of the citadel. It's a miserable operation. But then, the workers hit a pocket in the earth. They don't pull out gold masks or jeweled daggers. They pull out dirt-hardened baked dirt. Clay tablets, not just a few, thousands of them. Winkler had found the royal archive. He picks one up. He can read the scriptits cuneiform, the standard writing of the Near East. But as he scans the wedges, his heart sinks. He can read the sounds, but the words are gibberish. It's the readable but unintelligible language we mentioned earlier. It's a code without a key. But then he finds a tablet that makes his hands shake. It is written in Akkadian, the diplomatic language he can read. He scans the text. Treaty, ... Ramesses, great king of Egypt, ... He freezes. He is holding the Hittite version of the Treaty of Kadesh. The text that was carved on the walls of Karnak in Egypt, the text that spoke of a great king of Hatti as an equal to Pharaoh, was right here in his hands in the middle of nowhere in Turkey. The realization hits him like a physical blow. This isn't a provincial outpost. This is the capital. This is Hattusa. The insignificant tribe of the Bible was actually the master of the north, the rival of Egypt, the missing piece of the Bronze Age puzzle. But the voice of the Hittites was still locked in that strange, unreadable language. It would take another decade and a world war to break the silence. You are now in a quiet room in Vienna. In 1915, the world is burning in the First World War. But a Czech linguist named Bedřich Rozner is staring at a copy of the Winkler tablets. He is looking at that famous sentence, Nu nindon isotini, watarma ikotini. We talked about this earlier, the bread and water moment. But think about the implications. Rozner realizes that water is water, esotini is eat. He isn't just translating a sentence, he is discovering a family tree. He realizes that the Hittites were Indo-Europeans. They were the long-lost brothers of the Greeks, the Romans, and the Germans. They had marched out of the steppes and imposed their language on the ancient Near East. This discovery rocked the academic world. It meant that Indo-European history went back much further than anyone thought. It also confirmed a fringe linguistic theory proposed by Ferdinand de Saussure years earlier. Saussure had predicted, using pure math and logic, that the original Proto-Indo-European language must have had certain laryngeal sounds. Throaty sounds like H that had disappeared in all known languages, like Greek or Sanskrit. Rozner looked at the Hittite texts and saw the letter H everywhere. Hant for front, Haster for star. The Hittites had preserved the ghost sounds of the mother language. They were the missing link in human speech. Suddenly, the archive spoke. And it didn't just speak, it shouted. As translations poured out, the Hittites stopped being a mystery and started being people. We read their laws. We found out that they were weirdly progressive about sexual crimes, but really harsh about property damage. We read their rituals, we read about their insecure kings, their bossy queens, their horse training, and their obsession with cleanliness. Scholars began to debate a new, tantalizing possibility found in the texts. The Hittites wrote frequently about a kingdom to the west called Ahayawa. They mentioned a city called Wayusa. Linguists looked at the words. Ahayawa sounds a lot like Achaeans, the Homeric name for the Greeks. Waylusa sounds a lot like Wiliusta, archaic name for Troy Ilias. Were the Hittite archives actually documenting the background of the Trojan War? There is a letter, the Tawagalawa letter, where the Hittite king writes to the king of Ahiawa, treating him as a brother, a great king, and complaining about a renegade warlord named Piamaradu, who some link to Priam of Troy. Historians are still fighting a cage match over this. Was there a real Trojan War fought between the Mycenaean Greeks and a Hittite vassal state? The Hittite texts suggest that yes, the Greeks were active on the coast of Turkey, causing trouble, raiding cities, and playing politics. The Iliad might be a distant mythologized echo of a very real geopolitical struggle that you can trace in the clay tablets of Hattusa. You stand back at the Lion Gate today. The site is a UNESCO World Heritage Treasure. tourists wander through the ruins, snapping photos of the green stone in the Great Temple. The clay tablets are safely behind glass in the Museum of Anatolian Civilizations in Ankara. The silence of the plateau has returned, but it's different now. It's not the silence of oblivion. It's the silence of a library after closing time. The story has been told. The ghost has spoken. You look at the lions one last time. They have lost their terrifying power to ward off demons, but they have gained something else: immortality. They survived the fire. They survived the winter. They survived the forgetting. And now, thanks to the mud they were buried in, they have survived long enough to meet you. The Hittites vanished because they built a system that was too rigid to bend when the winds of change blew. They vanished because they relied on a complex web of trade that could be snapped by a few ships. But in a way, they never really left. Every time you check your horoscope Babylonian via Hittite transmission, every time you see a double-headed eagle on a flag, every time you speak a word of English that shares a root with Niseli, you are hearing the faint echo of the chariots rolling across the plain. When down the sun has finally set over the Anatolian plateau. The tour buses have gone. The museum gates are locked. You are left alone with the wind that comes rushing down from the Pontic Mountains, whistling through the empty window frames of the royal citadel. It's a cold wind, the same one that chilled Mercelli as he prayed, the same one that froze the horses of Kikuli. Take a deep breath, let the dust of history settle. We have walked a long road tonight. We marched 1,200 miles to Babylon and back. We stood in the forge where iron was born. We felt the panic of the plague and the adrenaline of the chariot charge at Kadesh. We watched a civilization build itself up, stone by stone, conquer the known world, and then dissolve into smoke and ash in a single lifetime. It's a heavy story. It reminds us that nothing is permanent. The Hittites thought their walls were unbreachable. They thought their treaties were eternal. They thought their gods would never abandon them. But the earth shook, the climate shifted, and the systems broke. It's a humbling thought for us. Living in our own complex, interconnected world, we are not so different from them. We are just the latest people to build our houses on the plateau, hoping the roof holds against the storm. But there is comfort in the rediscovery. It means that even when things are lost, they are not gone forever. The clay remembers, the stones remember, and now you remember. The lions are guarding the empty city in the dark. The stars, the same stars the Hittite priests charted, are wheeling overhead. The silence is soft now, wrapping around the ruins like a blanket. You can let go of the dates and the names. Let go of Sepululima and Ramesses. Let the history fade back into the earth. It will be there waiting if you ever want to return. For now, the fire is out. The tablet is finished. The scribe has put down his stylus. Good night.